Chapter 501. A suspense novel with positive energy? This was a rare phrase, but unfortunately, the host also knew that he wasn't a gossip reporter. He only asked a few questions and didn't ask any further. Therefore, the fans below the stage were teased by the host, but they realized that this guy actually changed the topic. They couldn't help but complain in their hearts. The host then asked a few questions that the readers were more concerned about. It was about Yang Yi's interaction with the readers. Yang Yi also responded one by one. He also introduced to the fans that he would be interacting with the book review section from time to time, as well as his plans for future fan activities. This made the fans feel more excited. Most of the people present were young people. They were full of energy and were happy to participate in these activities. Of course, there were also a lot of people who weren't interested and just wanted to listen for fun. However, this conversation wasn't long. The host was also concise and didn't arouse the disgust of the fans. Finally, according to my understanding, Yang Yi, you came to Guangzhou today with a special surprise for the fans who support you, right? The host asked with a smile. That's right. On my personal website, I asked my colleagues to count some of the more popular requests. One of them is that they want me to sing for the fans at the signing event. Before Yang Yi finished speaking, there was a burst of cheers from below the stage. Could it be that Yang Yi was going to sing in public today? This guy wasn't like some anchors who would be flooded with "anchors, don't sing, we're on the same side" comments. There were already rumors that he could sing very well. The eyes of some of the reporters in the commercial plaza lit up in anticipation. Yang Yi smiled and said, "I've thought about this request for a long time. In the end, I've decided to write a song for everyone. I'll write a song for the fans, a song for our family of fans." The fans applauded excitedly, especially when they heard Yang Yi's last words. Mu Yuqing, who had jokingly set up a family of fans post on Yang Yi's personal website and didn't expect to be officially recognized, puffed out his chest proudly. "Okay, then let's welcome Yang Yi with a round of applause. He'll sing a song for everyone, a brand new song." The host looked at Yang Yi. "Glory, the name of the song is Glory." Yang Yi helped him add. In the midst of the applause, the host walked off the stage. Of course, just like the stage, there wasn't any accompaniment. There was only the accompaniment from the sound system. The prelude was a vocal accompaniment. Yang Yi, Murphy, and Jin Ming studied it for a few days. In the end, they made some slight changes according to Yang Yi's original score. They reduced the snapping sound and left only the beautiful vocal prelude. "Thank you for the glory you've given me. I want to bow to you deeply, because the effort I've put in, someone can understand." Yang Yi grabbed the microphone and sang in a falsetto voice. It was really a song to thank the fans. They could hear the lyrics from the beginning. However, at that moment, the fans below the stage didn't know that Yang Yi was using a falsetto voice. They thought that Yang Yi's voice was so delicate and soft. Fortunately, when it came to the main song, Yang Yi's voice returned to normal. Although the tone was still trendy, his unique magnetic voice still made the fans below the stage a little intoxicated. Yang Yi stretched out his left hand and pointed his palm at the fans. He sang affectionately, thunderous applause, surging emotions. "This is just the beginning, not the end. When you clapped your hand until it hurts for me, what should I do to repay your love?" The fans understood the gist of the lyrics. It was to thank them for the applause they gave to Yang Yi. Of course, the applause was just a symbol of their support for Yang Yi. There was no one else who could sing this kind of gratitude. Yang Yi's fans felt a sense of pride from the bottom of their hearts. This is the author that we're following. He's not worse than those sissy celebrities. Moreover, he knows how to write songs. He knows how to write songs to thank the fans. The fans thought proudly. Moreover, this song isn't just for show. It's sung very well. However, what was so good about it? They couldn't say. In this shopping mall, the only person who could say what was so good about it was probably Murphy, who was watching Yang Yi sing with Shi in the lounge. Yang Yi's singing of this song was very unique, especially when it came to the pronunciation. For example, when it came to the word when you did it for me, Yang Yi used a little glissando technique to deal with this stress, including the word what in the next sentence. What should I do? Of course, the latter word wasn't as obvious as the word when. Don't underestimate these techniques. Although most people wouldn't notice it, there was still a difference in the sound of it. It could even be said that it made the texture of the music more substantial. These were all rehearsed by Yang Yi and Murphy in the recording studio, again and again, repeatedly. Murphy couldn't help but look away and look at the little girl next to her who was staring at her father intently. She couldn't help but feel happy. After today's events, she should know that her father is also a famous person, right? Thank you for the glory you've given me. They entered the chorus again. Although Yang Yi sang the same content as the beginning, his voice didn't become like before. He still sang with his normal voice. The falsetto technique was used once. There was no need to abuse it. Moreover, he was an 8-foot-tall man. It was quite strange for him to sing with his throat pinched. In the second chorus, the lyrics changed. Thank you for the glory you've given me. This man used to be so ordinary. It was you who made my dreams reach the peak. Below the stage, many fans who were listening carefully to the lyrics couldn't help but be moved. Yang Yi sang this line very sincerely. It also made the fans really feel that this once ordinary man didn't forget his roots after success. He still put the fans in a very important position in his heart. Of course, his success came from his own unremitting efforts, but without the support of these lovely fans, Yang Yi wouldn't have had the chance to succeed. Thank you all. Yang Yi's eyes expressed silently. More than that, thousands of words were gathered in his song. In the end, Yang Yi sang again, "This is our glory. This is an ode to joy for you. Every one of you is my great hero." The song came to an end with the same harmony vocal accompaniment. Thank you all. Just like the song says, every achievement I achieve, every glory, is the result of everyone's support. It is the glory that belongs to everyone. Yang Yi said sincerely after singing the song and bowed deeply. Saying these words, Yang Yi said it from the bottom of his heart. Because of the previous controversy on the internet, Yang Yi understood that these lovely fans had always been supporting him. The fans below the stage applauded one after another. Their faces were blooming with smiles and glory. Yang Yi, thank you. This is also the best gift you've given us. Sitting in the front row, there was an excited fan who stood up and shouted with his arms raised. No, I just did a very insignificant thing. Every one of your support gathered together is the best gift for me. Yang Yi responded. Chapter 502. After singing the song, the real business had just begun. After all, at the signing event, the main thing was for Yang Yi to sign the books for the fans who bought the books. Yang Yi had also specially thought of a set of artistic signatures for this signing event. The signing was very fast and could be done with a few strokes. However, it was not sloppy. If one looked carefully, they could still recognize the two words, Yang Yi. Moreover, Yang Yi had integrated the calligraphy characteristics of the cursive. It looked very natural and artistic. After all, Yang Yi had learned zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting. Although he was not proficient in the latter three, his calligraphy was still better than ordinary people. Yang Yi's attitude was very proper. Every time a fan came up with a book, he would seriously say, "Thank you" to them. Then, he would take the book with both hands and sign his name on the title page. However, if only the signing event was so simple. Not long after, a girl with a red face holding a book came up. She came up and stuttered, "Yang Yi. Yang Yi dada, I am your fan. Thank you. Don't be anxious. Speak slowly." Yang Yi kindly comforted the other party. "No, what I want to say is, other than being your fan, I am also your fan." After the girl stopped stuttering, she excitedly said, "I want to, other than signing, can I hug you?" "Oh." The fans at the back all shouted one after another. "What's the situation?" Fans who were at the back of the line who did not know anxiously asked the people around them. The girl's request was gradually passed down. Yang Yi was embarrassed. However, the more embarrassed he was, the more the fans behind him cheered, "Hug, hug, hug. Cough, cough. There's no need to hug. I'm not an idol," Yang Yi said embarrassedly. "Then can we take a picture together?" The young girl crossed her arms and looked at Yang Yi sadly, settling for the next best thing. Yang Yi could only nod. The girl happily handed her phone to the host on the stage and asked him to help take a picture. Yang Yi stood behind the girl and smiled. However, his smile soon froze because the other party actually went overboard and stuck to Yang Yi's body. She even reached out and hugged Yang Yi's waist with a happy and satisfied look. Murphy, who was backstage, saw the entire scene. Although she knew that Yang Yi was innocent and was forced, Murphy couldn't help but feel sour in her heart. "Don't watch this. Let's watch cartoons," Murphy snorted and said to Shi, who was staring at her father with wide eyes. Shi's interest was immediately piqued. The little girl had been watching her father sign, and sign again for a while. She had long felt bored. She happily replied, Then, she jumped down from the sofa and took the remote control from the table in the lounge. The little girl was not tall enough. She had to stand on her tiptoes to reach the remote control in the middle of the table. However, she still managed to grab it. Then, she ran back and handed it to her mother with a smile. Murphy glanced at Yang Yi, who was signing for the girl, in annoyance. Then, she changed the channel and found the cartoon channel for Shi. "Mom, are you unhappy?" Shi was originally very happy to sit back on the sofa and then squeeze into her mother's arms. However, the little girl gradually became more sensible. She seemed to be able to sense that Murphy was a little angry. So, she held her mother's hand and asked in a daze, "No. Mom is not unhappy." Murphy used her face to touch Shi's little head and gently said, "All right then, I thought Mama was unhappy." The little girl smiled happily again. Her big eyes had a smile that made people's mood brighten. She explained, "So Mom is not unhappy." Then, there was nothing else. Shi's logical thinking ability was not as thorough as an adult's. Mo Fei chuckled and shook his head. At the signing event, Yang Yi, who was inexperienced, was in a difficult situation. The girl gave the other book fans a lot of inspiration. Except for a small number of male book fans who were embarrassed, most of the book fans eagerly wanted to take a photo with Yang Yi. At this rate, when would the signing event end? Fortunately, Mo Shaowan, who was watching from the side, noticed Yang Yi's trouble in time. She found the host and muttered a few words. Then, the host walked up to the stage and explained to the book fans, "I'm very sorry. Please inform everyone." The host's voice came from the sound system. "Due to the limited time, I'm worried that many book fans who are waiting in line will not be able to get a signed book. Therefore, we have to suspend the photo activities with Yang Yi. I hope everyone can understand." Yang Yi was saved. If it was just a simple autograph, it would be easier. However, there were still some book fans who could not help but talk to Yang Yi. For example, the young mother who walked up next brought her 7 or 8-year-old son and said, "Yang Yi, hello. Our whole family is your fan, especially my son, Xiaoqi. He especially likes the storybooks you wrote." Yang Yi smiled and nodded. Then, he winked at the little boy who shyly hid behind his mother and said, "I'm honored to be liked by you." Although the little boy named Xiaoqi was still embarrassed to talk to Yang Yi could see that he was happy after he said those words. The young mother smiled and said, "Xiaoqi is really timid. He kept asking me who Shi is at home. Why does she always listen to Uncle Yang Yi's stories?" Xiaoqi shyly pulled his mother's arm and whispered, "Stop talking." "Look, he's shy now," the young mother smiled and said. She is my daughter. That's why I tell her so many stories. Of course, Uncle still shares these stories with you." Yang Yi smiled and told Xiaoqi the answer. In order to give the little book fan an autograph, Yang Yi specially left an extra sentence in front of the Shi's Bedtime Stories book that they brought. I wish Xiaoqi to grow up quickly and make progress in his studies. The young mother took the book and was very grateful. However, she could not help but nag, Yang-yi, I'd like to ask if you will continue to write more fairy tales? I've read this book to the child many times. Yang-yi nodded with a smile and said, Of course. I've written 2 storybooks. One of them is a long story that's more suitable for children of Xiaoqi's age. The second one is similar to the Shi's Bedtime Stories book. They're both more interesting fairy tales. It's still being typeset and proofread by the publishing house, but I believe it will be released soon. Then, Mom, you must remember to buy it. Xiaoqi finally opened his mouth and said to his mother eagerly, Of course, we'll definitely support you. Good luck, Yang-yi. The young mother smiled and said, Thank you for your support. Yang-yi smiled. Book signing events were always like this. The book fans always had all kinds of strange requests or endless things to say. Yang-yi was in pain but happy at the same time. His hand was sore from signing autographs and his face was almost stiff from maintaining a smile. However, it was still very interesting to communicate with the readers. Yang-yi could hear their hearts and also gain their heartfelt love and admiration. Feelings were mutual. Yang-yi was sincere, and of course, the others would also be sincere. However, Yang-yi did not realize that he was going to be in trouble. Chapter 503. At noon, the number of people in the queue gradually decreased. Some of the shopping mall customers also left to look for food. Yang-yi patiently signed autographs for the rest of the fans, although in the end, he was a little tired and his hands were weak. I'm sorry to keep you waiting. Yang-yi sent away the last fan, who was holding a book, and said apologetically to Mu Yuqing, who was chatting with Mo Xiaowan, You go to the restaurant with my assistant first. I have some personal matters to deal with. I'll be there soon. Xiaowan, let Mu Yuqian order whatever she wants to eat. Yang-yi said with a smile. At noon, he was going to treat Mu Yuqing to lunch, which was agreed before. However, before that, Yang-yi had to pick up Shi and Murphy. When Yang-yi returned to the lounge, Shi, who was watching cartoons, happily ran over. The little girl reached out to her father for a hug, and then in her father's arms, she pouted and said, Papa, why are you back so late? I'm starving. Didn't I ask Auntie Xiaowan to bring you some biscuits? Yang-yi asked with concern. Yes, she ate it and drank milk, Murphy said from the side. But I didn't eat. Shi argued, hugging her father's neck. Yang-yi rubbed his daughter's little head and said with a smile, Well, it doesn't matter. Let's go for lunch now. After letting Shi take her small school bag, Yang-yi asked Murphy with concern, Are you hungry? Murphy pursed her lips, turned her head and snorted, I'm not hungry. Yang-yi was too familiar with Murphy's little tsundere at this moment. He was stunned, and then asked, What's wrong? Why are you suddenly unhappy? I'm not unhappy, Murphy retorted, but her face was full of unhappiness. Although she tried her best not to show her anger, some emotions were hard to hide. Yang-yi stroked Murphy's hair lovingly and said, How can I not know how you are? Look at your expression. It's obvious that you're saying, I'm in a bad mood. I won't listen to you. Come and comfort me. Yang-yi's teasing words still amused Murphy so much that the corners of her mouth couldn't help but curl up. She almost laughed out loud. However, Shi, who was carrying her little school bag, turned her head in confusion and looked at her father. The little girl asked in confusion, Papa, what are you talking about? Yang-yi was a little embarrassed. He said to Shi, No, it's okay. I was talking to your mother, not you. Murphy held back her laughter and picked up Shi. Then she said to Yang-yi, Well, let's not talk so much. Go and eat with your book friends first. But you still haven't told me why you're unhappy. Yang-yi asked in confusion. Murphy pursed her lips and shook her hair. Then, she turned around and walked out first. With her back to Yang-yi, she snorted, I'm not unhappy. Murphy still cared about the overall situation. During lunch, she didn't give Yang-yi any face, nor did she treat Mu Yuqing coldly. Instead, she listened more and talked less. She took care of she herself and occasionally answered a few questions thrown by Mu Yuqing. However, compared to Murphy, who had been famous for a long time, Mu Yuqing was more interested in his idol, Yang Yi. While eating, he threw out questions one after another. Yang Yi, everyone says that you're a soldier, but you haven't publicly admitted it. I want to know, is this true? Yang Yi smiled and nodded. It's true. I used to be a soldier for more than 10 years. Similar to Su Sanduo in Soldier's Assault? Mu Yuqing asked excitedly. Pretty much, but novels are artistic. My family isn't as poor as Su Sanduo, and my family is very supportive of me becoming a soldier. I've had the ambition to be a soldier since the beginning, Yang Yi explained. Mu Yuqing quickly nodded. I understand. What I mean is, looking at Yang Yi's figure, I know that you're amazing. Haha, you flatter me. Yang Yi smiled and shook his head. Actually, as far as being a soldier is concerned, the figure isn't the most important. Look at Su Sanduo. His height made it impossible for him to be selected, but in the end, he still became a qualified and outstanding soldier. This shows that a strong will is the most important thing. But Yang Yi, your figure is really good. There are netizens posting on your personal website. They said that after hugging you, they realized that your figure is great. Your waist is full of muscles. Mu Yuqing excitedly held up his phone and said, I was sitting by the side and was bored, so I saw it. Yang Yi, do you want to take a look? It's this post. He really touched the pot that didn't boil. At this moment, Murphy stretched out her hand. Let me see. Yang Yi raised his eyebrows slightly. He thought of that bold female fan. Although he had taken photos with a few other fans, the only one who hugged him was that girl. Mu Yuqing hesitated, but he didn't know how to refuse. In the end, he still passed the phone to Murphy. Murphy took the phone and read it. She didn't pay attention to what the post said, but she saw a photo. In the photo, there was a girl hugging Yang Yi's waist like a little bird. She was in his arms, and her heart was instantly filled with jealousy. Mu Yuqing wasn't stupid. He also realized something. He laughed dryly and quickly defended Yang Yi. Don't misunderstand. That photo was taken at the scene. Hundreds and thousands of people saw it. I know. I saw it in the lounge. Murphy handed the phone back to Mu Yuqing as if nothing had happened. She smiled. I didn't care. How could she not care? Yang Yi knew Murphy the best. The more she acted as if nothing had happened, the more it meant that she took it to heart. I see. Yang Yi thought to himself. No wonder Murphy was unhappy before. So this was the reason. But now wasn't the time to reconcile. Yang Yi changed the topic with Mu Yuqing. Mu Yuqing, I heard from old Lu that you're in the IT industry. I don't know what field you're in. After dinner, it was already 3 in the afternoon. Yang Yi brought the tired Murphy and she back to the hotel to rest. After coaxing she to sleep, Yang Yi came to the other side of the bed and sat beside Murphy. Murphy was sulking. She pretended to be asleep, but in fact, she turned her head and opened her eyes. Hey, why are you sitting here? Don't disturb my nap. Murphy said angrily. Yang Yi grabbed her hand and carefully looked at her aggrieved expression. He sighed and said, Okay, don't be angry. I'll explain to you. The photo is not the same as the reality. Don't be jealous. I didn't know that girl was so bold. I know. You rejected her at first, but she still hugged you. Murphy pursed her lips and muttered, It's not your fault. I know. Then why are you still so angry? Yang Yi asked, puzzled. I'm not angry. Murphy insisted. You're still denying it? I can see that you're unhappy. Yang Yi said, Do you know? Actually, I wanted to pull her away and throw her off the stage. Hey, you can't be so violent. She's just a fan. Murphy became anxious for Yang Yi. If you hit someone, tomorrow's newspaper will scold you. Yang Yi reached out and scratched Murphy's nose and said with a smile, "Thank you for being so concerned about me. But, if you can understand my helplessness at that time, why are you still sulking here?" Murphy was silent for a moment before she said with grievance, "I'm not sulking. I just feel a little unhappy. I'm jealous." Murphy turned around and hugged Shi and moved her inside. Then she also moved to make some space for Yang Yi. "After all, it's not true. Don't take it to heart." Yang Yi lay down beside Murphy, facing her and gently stroking her face. "I want you to hug me." Murphy, like a child, looked at Yang Yi pitifully and said. Yang Yi hugged her in his arms and carefully protected her slightly bulging belly. "Ba Ji," he gently kissed her forehead and said, "Don't sulk anymore, okay? It's not good for you and the child." "N." Murphy softly responded, "I want your arms to belong to me alone." Suddenly, Murphy raised her head and looked at Yang Yi with sparkling eyes and said, "Except for our child. Of course. You're the only one." Yang Yi smiled. Murphy smiled with satisfaction. Like that girl, she hugged Yang Yi's waist and then rubbed against Yang Yi's chest like a kitten. "Okay, it's time to sleep." Yang Yi couldn't help but smile. He rubbed her head and said, "Rest well. We still have to go out tonight to see the night view of Yongcheng." Chapter 504. Although Yang Yi and Murphy did not publicly announce their whereabouts, they did not try to hide it either. In fact, even when they discovered reporters taking photos, they did not mind. At most, they simply picked up Shi and turned her face to the other side as if nothing had happened. As a result, the next day, the media began to expose news of Murphy and Yang Yi touring around Yongcheng. Shocking news. Yang Yi comes to Yongcheng for a signing event and she's with him. Mo Fei and Yang Yi went on a night trip to the Pearl River, holding hands so romantically that they made the mandarin ducks jealous. So Murphy, who was on vacation, went to Yongcheng. Pregnant Murphy makes her first appearance. She looks like a young girl in pink and red hat. Yang Yi and his family appear on the streets of Yongcheng. Murphy smiles brightly, but her belly is still big. There were also some tabloid media that did not get tired of digging out the restaurants that Murphy and Yang Yi went to. Although not all of them were accurate, they still allowed people to see a side of Murphy that was similar to normal people. Murphy and Yang Yi's micro-broadcasting updates were actually slower than theirs. As they were busy touring around Yongcheng, they went back to the hotel to rest. They only slowly uploaded the photos they took when they got home to micro-broadcasting. It had to be said that women loved to look good. Even Murphy had to carefully edit the photos before she uploaded them. Unlike Yang Yi, even though he taught Murphy the software, Yang Yi did not like to edit photos. On the other hand, Murphy never got tired of it. Yang Yi sang Glory to his fans at the signing event. On the same day, the song was uploaded onto all the major music websites and released as a single. However, this time, he used his real name. Murphy had previously told her fans about the news on micro-broadcasting, so her fans were not surprised. In fact, they had been looking forward to it for almost 2 weeks. When the song was finally released, they couldn't wait to buy it, download it and listen to it online. Normally, new singers would need a long time to gain recognition from the market. However, Yang Yi was different. On the first day of release, his song made it to the top 10 of the new songs chart. Everyone says that Yang Yi's singing is very good. Today, I finally got the chance to see it for myself. He is indeed very good. Although the first line's falsetto was a little flashy, I have to say, he sang it really well. His first line alone made my scalp tingle. Was Murphy the one humming in the prelude? I think I can tell that Murphy's voice is very distinctive. It's not just the falsetto. Yang Yi's pronunciation and breathing are very good. He doesn't sound like a fledgling singer at all. Moreover, Yang Yi's voice is also very nice. It has a magnetic quality that makes people unable to stop themselves. A lot of people are analyzing Yang Yi's singing skills. Is there no one who likes the concept of this song? I heard that this song was written by Yang Yi for his supporters. After listening to it, you feel very proud of yourself, don't you think? It's really a blessing to be a fan of Yang Yi and Murphy. He even wrote a song for his own fans. However, a few days later, the reviews of the song by the music critics came out one after another. Surprisingly, the reviews of Glory were mixed. The music critics who said that the song was good praised the arrangement of the song. The melody was simple, but it used a variety of techniques to accompany the voice. Like the arrangement of instruments, it reflected the layering of the vocal area very well. The music critics who gave the song a bad review were also very interesting. They felt that Yang Yi wrote the song and exaggerated the role of the fans in the content. It was like flattery, trying to use sensational language to gain popularity. In their opinion, compared to songs like Listen to the Sea, the emotions expressed in Glory were too vulgar. Everyone had their reasons, and the mixed reviews had become a distinct feature of the song. However, Yang Yi did not care about that. He did not release the song to curry favor with the music critics. Yang Yi did not even care about the sales of the song. For example, when Murphy released a new song in the past, in order to sell more CDs, she had to work hard to perform on major chart shows. She had to fly to several cities to catch up on announcements and promote. However, Yang Yi did not. His song was released online. Yang Yi did not participate in any chart shows. He also had Mo Xiaowan reject all the variety show invitations that came flying at him like paper. In fact, other than his signings, Yang Yi did not participate in any promotional activities. Many people were puzzled by his maverick behavior. However, when some gossip media were talking about why Yang Yi did not do anything to promote his song, someone dug out the words that Yang Yi and Murphy said in an interview when they returned from a concert in Guangzhou last month. Even if I debut, I will not be a qualified artist. At most, I will release an album and sing for everyone to listen to. Sure enough, he was not a qualified artist. The media ridiculed Yang Yi and even compared him to Murphy, who was jokingly called the Ice Queen by the media many years ago. Compared to his wife, Yang Yi seems to be more aloof. Of course, there was no free lunch in this world. All the gains had to be exchanged with hard work. Yang Yi did not participate in major chart shows and other promotional activities. The negative effects gradually showed. A week after its release, Glory was only at number 6 on the chart. Although at the beginning, the song showed a surprising momentum, it was weak and barely climbed to the 6th position. However, anyone could see that the declining daily sales had already destined the song's upper limit. Regarding this, the emperor was not worried, but the eunuchs were worried. Many entertainment media felt sorry for Yang Yi. They felt that Yang Yi's song had the potential to hit number 1 on the chart, perhaps they were deliberately exaggerating. However, Yang Yi's arrogance stopped the song. If Yang Yi was willing to work harder, he might be able to replicate Fei Yu's Miracle from 12 years ago. As a new singer, he had a song reach the top of the chart right after his debut. The entertainment media felt sorry for him, but Yang Yi did not care. You really don't care about the rankings? Mo Xiaowan sighed. I think if you win a big award, our company's reputation will be spread. What does it matter if it's spread or not? Murphy and I only sing because we like to sing. We don't sing for awards or to compete with others for rankings. Yang Yi smiled faintly. I think so too. I don't want to get an award, as long as people like my songs. Mo Fei was very happy next to them and said, Sis, you won't be as willful as brother-in-law in the future, right? You're a serious singer, you can't not participate in the chart show. Mo Xiaowan asked fearfully. However, Murphy looked serious. I'm thinking about this. I may or may not go. It depends on the situation. Anyway, I don't care about these things anymore. Murphy liked her current free and easy life and work. I really don't know what to do with you guys. The husband sings and the wife follows. Mo Xiaowan rolled her eyes. Yang Yi looked at the time and smiled. It's about time. Go back and rest. Xiaowan, you've worked hard at today's signing event in Spring City. I'll give you a day off tomorrow. I'm going to take Murphy and Shishi somewhere. It's a bit far and we'll have to drive a long way. Unknowingly, more than a week had passed since the press conference in Yongqing. Yongyi had already held 3 signing events. Spring City in Kaiyun Province was the 4th stop. Murphy asked curiously, "Aren't we going to Spring City tomorrow?" Yongyi shook his head and smiled. "It's in another city, but it's not too far from Spring City." "Then where are we going?" Murphy's curiosity was off the charts. Yongyi's eyes revealed a trace of complicated emotions. Of course, part of it was longing. He said softly, "A home. In another sense, it's a home to me." Chapter 505. In fact, Yang Yi's original plan to hold a book signing event in Spring City was to distribute the resources reasonably so that the book fans in the Southwest could also participate in the limited number of book signing events. Spring City was indeed beautiful, and it was worth Yang Yi bringing Murphy and Shishi for a trip. So at first, he didn't plan to return to the army to take a look. However, after a phone call with Shen Xinyu more than half a month ago, Yang Yi changed his mind. He felt that he couldn't escape from the past, and that it was time to go back and take a look. It just so happened that Mo Fei and Cici were also together, so Yang Yi decided to take them back with him, so that Cici could also see the place where her father once worked hard. So, early this morning, Yang Yi drove a rented car and drove off with Murphy and Shishi. Once they were out of Spring City and away from the big city, the natural scenery along the way gradually became richer. There were endless green mountains, sparkling lake water, and white water birds gliding on the surface of the lake. The sky was also very clean and pure. The shimmering spring scenery was intoxicating, and they couldn't help but want to sing, "Where is spring? Where is spring?" Hee hee. Shishi's childish voice came through the open car window. "Why don't you continue singing?" Murphy asked with a smile in the car. "Mom wants to sing too, Mom wants to sing too, I can't remember all of it." Cici grabbed Mo Fei's hand, which was waving around for her to command, and smiled happily. She was so happy that her eyes turned into crescents. "Okay, you first," Murphy said. "Where is spring? Where is spring, spring?" Shishi started singing from the beginning. "Spring is in the green mountain forest." Murphy also sang. She didn't use any special skills, just her clear voice. Just like Shishi, she clapped her hands and shook her head as she sang. Her voice was also full of childlike charm. Yang Yi held the steering wheel in front and smiled slightly. He had just taught them this nursery rhyme on the road. Because they had to drive for a few hours, Yang Yi was worried that Shishi would feel bored. However, the melody of this song was light and the rhythm was clear. Basically, one could sing it after listening to it once. Although Shishi said that she couldn't remember it, the little girl really liked this song. As Murphy sang, Shishi happily followed along. Dee 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 lee 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 lee. Although Shishi did not enunciate the words clearly, she sang very hard. This interesting melody made Shishi dance with joy. In the green forest in spring, there are little orioles that can sing. While Yang Yi was driving, he would also glance at the rearview mirror and look at Mo Fei and Cici, who were singing happily while shaking their heads. "Who's the little oriole?" Murphy teased Shishi. "I'm the little oriole. I'm the little oriole that can sing." Cici giggled. She was already tired from laughing. She leaned back on the child's safety seat, turned her head, and pointed at herself as she spoke to her mother. "Who said she wasn't?" The little girl's voice was so clear and sweet, as cute as the little oriole. Along the way, time passed quickly. After a few hours, Yang Yi's car arrived at Yongchong City. However, he wasn't going to the city. His car was going to the suburbs. Finally, he appeared in front of a military district. This military district was no different from the others. It was also surrounded by long walls. From afar, he could only see some simple buildings. There were armed soldiers standing guard at the door and military barricades to prevent collisions. Whatever the Jiangnan military district had, there was also everything here. This was very normal. This military camp was not exclusive to Zhonlang. It also belonged to the Southwest Military District. There was also an artillery company and 2 reconnaissance companies. Jean Lang's usual training location was deep in the mountains and forests behind, or even further and more difficult places. This was just their base. There was no melodramatic plot of being stopped. Yang Yi stopped the car and registered at the door. He also made an internal phone call at the door and asked Shan Xinyu to come out and pick them up. Before coming, Yang Yi had of course explained to Luo Zongxing and Shan Xinyu to confirm that no one was out training or on a mission today. Of course, if there was really an urgent mission and Yang Yi and the others were empty-handed, there was nothing they could do. Fortunately, there was no sudden urgent mission. On the phone, Shan Xinyu was so excited that she didn't know what she threw. With a loud bang, she hung up the phone and said, "I'll be there soon." After putting down the phone, Yang Yi smiled at the soldiers at the door and nodded. Then, he walked to the waiting area and took Shi from Murphy's arms. He said softly to the nervous Murphy, "It's okay. Relax. They will come to pick us up soon." Murphy nodded gently, but she still couldn't relax. The soldiers standing guard next to her had a serious look on their faces. They were even holding guns. Looking inside, they could see a tank parked inside. The big barrel looked unstoppable. Yang Yi glanced at Murphy's hand on his elbow. He could only pat it gently and comfort her. "I'm here." She hadn't recovered from her excited state yet. The little girl looked around curiously in her father's arms. Her big eyes kept looking at the uncle holding the steel gun. After looking for a while, she turned to look at the barricade on the other side. The barricade was a triangular camouflage rectangle, but it was densely covered with Mom's spikes. It looked ferocious and terrible. "Papa, what is this? It looks weird." She couldn't help but ask. She, don't make noise." Murphy was a little worried and scolded in a low voice. Looking at her frightened look, it was as if the soldiers standing guard would shoot them as soon as they opened their mouths. "It's okay. It's not that you can't talk. Just don't make a lot of noise." Yang Yi explained and then said to Shi, "This thing is called a barricade. In ancient times, it was used to stop horses from rushing over. But now, its function has changed. It is used to prevent vehicles from rushing into the military camp. Just like the car we drove here, we can't drive directly. It's like a hedgehog." She opened her little paws, smiled at her father, and whispered, "So many spikes." "Yes, it's like a hedgehog." Yang Yi didn't even remember that she knew the name of this animal. He was happy and laughed. At this time, a military jeep drove out and stopped at the gate. Shan Xinyu jumped out of the driver's seat. With his dark skin, he showed his white teeth and shouted, "Yang Yi." Yang Yi, Murphy, and she were let in. The rented car couldn't be driven in, so they just parked it on the side of the road. Anyway, they didn't have to worry about losing it at the gate of the military camp. They would need it when they went back tomorrow. Shan Xinyu and Yang Yi made a very manly fist and chest bump. Then, he smiled and greeted Murphy. "Is this sister-in-law? My name is Shan Xinyu, Yang Yi's comrade-in-arms. You can call me Little Shen." The last time Shan Xinyu and Luo Zongxing went to Jiang City, they didn't meet Murphy. After Murphy came in, she relaxed a little. She smiled and replied, "Hello, I'm Murphy." "I know. It was such a big news a while ago. Everyone in the military knew that old Yang married such a big star as his wife." Shan Xinyu laughed. "Don't say that. I'm just an ordinary person." Murphy waved her hand shyly. Shan Xinyu laughed. He had a good impression of Murphy. She was much better than before. In the past, he was worried that Murphy would ignore people because of her celebrity status. Now, it seemed that Murphy was quite approachable. Yang Yi had good taste. It's her first time in the military camp. She's a little nervous. Yang Yi explained for Murphy. "Hey, what's there to be nervous about? Sister-in-law, don't think too much. Just treat this as your home. Your husband used to be a soldier here. He's familiar with so many brothers like family." Shan Xinyu said happily. "Okay." Murphy nodded. Shi, you should also say hello to Uncle Shen. Yang Yi shook Shi's little hand and laughed. Just now, Shi had been looking at Shen Sinyu without blinking, as if she was confirming something. Shen Sinyu smiled and waved at Shi and said, "Hello. Shi, right? Do you still remember me? I met you last year." Shi finally reacted. The little girl pouted and said, "I remember you. You're the uncle who fought with my papa and was defeated by my papa." Wow, the little girl was very vengeful. She clearly remembered the fight between Shen Sinyu and Yang Yi. Shen Sinyu was embarrassed. In Yang Yi's laughter, he said resentfully, "How was I defeated by your father? I was letting your father win." Chapter 506. The place where Dad used to struggle. On the way to Yongchang City, Shi was very curious. Although she still couldn't understand the significance of this past to her father, it didn't stop her from being curious. The little girl liked everything about her father. She really wanted to know what kind of place her father used to live in before she was born. Sitting in the military vehicle, Shi and her mother sat together in the back seat. However, she wasn't content at all. She looked at the roof of the car for a while and then looked outside the car. She looked left and right. To Shi, the military camp was like a huge maze. The houses inside all looked the same. Then, there were many soldiers like Uncle Shen, wearing camouflage uniforms. They either walked in formation or drove a big truck. The big truck would make a rumbling sound. Did Dad work here in the past? Did Dad used to wear such strange clothes in the past? Many questions popped up in the little girl's mind. Soon, the jeep arrived at Zhang Lang's place. Shi saw that as soon as the car stopped, her father jumped out of the car and hugged a few people. Shi realized that 2 of them seemed to have come to their house last time. However, the little girl couldn't remember the names of the other uncles. She only remembered the bad guy, Uncle Shen, who fought with her father. Shi, let's get out of the car." Her mother's voice rang in her ears. Shi turned to look at her mother. The little girl, who was looking at her father absent-mindedly, was a little confused at this moment. However, she was still carried out of the jeep by her mother. Then, she landed on the ground. "Let me introduce you." Yang Yi walked over and carried Shi. Then, he pulled Murphy and introduced them to everyone again. With so many people watching, Shi still felt nervous. The little girl hugged her father's neck and looked at these uncles timidly. During her father's introduction, Shi finally remembered that she felt a little familiar. It was Uncle Luo and Uncle Yu. There were also a few other names that she couldn't remember. The little girl could only follow her father's instructions and greeted them in a low voice. "Hello, Uncle. This child is very obedient," Luo Zongxing said to Yang Yi with a smile. He even said to Murphy, "Sister-in-law, don't be nervous. Coming to Zhang Lang is like coming home. Yang Yi is our brother. He's not blood-related, but he's closer than blood-related. So, if you have any requests, just tell us. If we haven't taken care of you well, just point it out. Don't be polite." Murphy was a little embarrassed as she nodded her head and said, "You're all too enthusiastic. There's nothing wrong with taking care of him." Although Murphy was not used to this environment, she had to admit that the people here were smiling very sincerely. Gradually, she forgot her nervousness. It's almost noon. "Yang Yi, Murphy, you haven't eaten yet, right?" Luo Zongxing asked. Seeing them shake their heads, Luo Zongxing smiled and said, "That's good. Have lunch with us today. I told the kitchen to make extra portions for 3 people. It's just that the army doesn't have any special hospitality, so I'll have to trouble you to eat the army's food with us." It's okay, Murphy said quickly. "It's okay. I just wanted to come back to Zhang Lang to take a look. It's not like I have the idea to eat seafood." Yang Yi laughed. "Murphy and the others don't have to worry. It's just nice that they can broaden their horizons. Actually, the food in the army has improved a lot over the years. There's meat and vegetables for all 3 meals. Moreover, The brothers in the kitchen are good at cooking. This group of young men, every time it's time to eat, they will shout and rush into the cafeteria. Luo Zongxing led the way and said with a smile, "Hey, old Luo, I suddenly remembered." Shan Xinyu suddenly shouted, "There's still a child. You let Yang Yi's child eat the same food as us?" That's right. It was Shan Xinyu, the guy who Shi held a grudge against, who noticed this detail. He was still very concerned about Shi. Luo Zongxing, Shan Xinyu, Yu Xiaotian, and a few others turned their heads in unison to look at Shi, who was being held by Murphy. The little girl was a little scared and hid behind her father, one hand still holding her mother's hand. Yang Yi was stunned at first, then smiled and said, "It's okay. She's almost 5 years old. She'll eat what we usually eat. There won't be a problem. This child's appetite isn't as good as ours. The food is fine, but the food we eat is too hard for the child to digest." Yu Xiaotian rarely opened his mouth and said, "Then I'll go to the kitchen to make some more porridge?" Shan Xinyu asked, "Take a bowl of rice and boil it with some water." Yang Yi still knew some rules. He didn't want everyone to give special treatment to his child, so he quickly grabbed Shan Xinyu and said, "It's okay. Let her eat some food later. If she can eat, eat. If it's too hard, get some hot water. I'll make some milk powder for her. Milk will be fine." Eating in the army was not as gentle as eating outside. They chewed slowly. One by one, the soldiers lined up with plates, took the rice and vegetables, and then returned to the table to eat. They were sweating after training for the whole morning, but they didn't slack off at all when eating. They slurped the rice and then stuffed the vegetables into their mouths. The whole scene could only be described as wolfing down the food like a whirlwind. In less than 5 minutes, the soldiers walked out one by one with a plate of rice and no vegetables left. This scene made Murphy, who had just sat down with a plate, dumbfounded. "It's okay. Our table is special today. We can eat a little slower." Luo Zongxing noticed Murphy's gaze and quickly said, "Old Luo, indeed, this meal is much better than 6 years ago." Yang Yi held 2 plates and sat next to Murphy with Shi in between. He smiled and said to his brothers, "Look at what you're eating now. Chicken legs, pork belly, cabbage, and radish. If we had such good food back then, our Xiao would have grown at least 10 centimeters taller." Yu Xiaotian was a local of Kaiyun province. He was short and thin, and was often teased by Yang Yi and the others. However, it wasn't malicious, so he didn't care. "Yes. I said you didn't come at the right time," Shen Xinyu said. "Anyway, your wife and child will get used to it. It's fine as long as they don't think it's too simple." Luo Zongxing smiled and said, "Let's eat, let's eat." Just now, Luo Zongxing said that they could eat a little slower, but when they really started eating, Luo Zongxing and the others also swept away the clouds, one eating faster than the other. Murphy also wanted to eat faster, but she really couldn't. After stuffing a big mouthful of rice, she couldn't chew it. "Slow down, slow down." Yang Yi saw it. He stopped his chopsticks and poured a glass of water for Murphy and said with a smile. It has to be said that the sound of everyone eating made him feel very familiar. Perhaps affected by the environment, Yang Yi also sped up. He ate very quickly, almost at the same speed as Luo Zongxing and the others. He finished all the food on his plate. Then, while helping Shi tear the chicken leg meat, he talked to Luo Zongxing and the others about his current situation. "You've started writing songs and becoming a star," Shen Xinyu said in surprise. "When we saw the news, we thought it was fake news." "Well, these years, I've been running around outside, and I've improved a lot. Like writing songs, I didn't realize that I had talent in this area before," Yang Yi said with a smile. Luo Zongxing, on the other hand, was more concerned about Cici. He and his wife hadn't had children yet, but they had reached the age of being a loving father. He looked lovingly at the little girl who was using her chopsticks to pick up the drumstick and put it into her mouth. He asked softly, "Cici, do you think it's delicious?" Cici raised her head and looked at this Uncle Luo. Perhaps it was because they were gradually becoming more familiar with each other. She nodded and said, this one is good, but this one is too hard. It doesn't taste good. The little girl pointed at the streaky pork with her chopsticks. This streaky pork was cooked by stir-frying. The meat was a little hard. For adults, the taste was very good, but for she, it was a little difficult to bite. Then eat more drumsticks and vegetables. Luo Zongxing stood up and said, I'll go over there and see if there are any drumsticks. Yang Yi quickly stopped Luo Zongxing and said with a smile, Old Luo, there's no need. One drumstick is enough. She can't eat too much. This drumstick was still very big, and a lot of meat could be torn off. She finished a drumstick and some stir-fried radishes, then drank some milk and began to burp. The little girl was still a little embarrassed. She hid in her father's arms and secretly peeked at the other uncles, afraid that they would laugh at her. Then she twisted in her father's arms and laughed at her own hiccups. She whispered to her father, I'm full. Hee. In order not to waste food, Yang Yi also finished the rest of Shi's food. Fortunately, Yang Yi didn't give Shi too much rice. The rice here was indeed very hard, and Shi didn't want to eat it after tasting it. Murphy also burped after eating. I've arranged the rooms in the guest house for you. Go back and rest at noon. What do you want to do in the afternoon? I'll get someone to show you around and see Yang Yi's old dormitory. Or to watch our training? Luo Zongxing asked. The training at the base didn't have any special programs that needed to be kept secret, so it was fine to show Yang Yi, Murphy, and the others. Yang Yi looked at Murphy, but Murphy let Yang Yi make the decision. Then let's go and watch the training. My old dormitory has been changed several times, and I'm not the one living there now. There's no need to disturb other people's beds. Yang Yi smiled and said, just as well. Let she see what a soldier is like. Chapter 507. In the afternoon, in the big field, a group of soldiers carrying big backpacks and spears were running in an orderly and rhythmic manner. This kind of running with weights and maintaining a fast speed was extremely exhausting. They tried their best to adjust their breathing, but every time they ran a lap, they had to follow the team and shout the slogan in unison. This was another big test for themselves. Under the shade of a tree, Murphy sat on a small stool and asked Yang Yi in confusion, after running for so long, aren't they tired? Yang Yi stood on the side and looked at his comrades who were training in a daze. When he heard Murphy's question, he came back to his senses and said with a smile, in Wolf Warriors, this is just a very basic training. Of course, even the basic training has higher requirements than other troops. Only by constantly gritting your teeth and working hard can you break through your limits and become better and stronger soldiers. Then how many laps do they have to run? Murphy asked curiously. I don't know if the current standards have changed or not. In the past, we had to run 20 laps and carry weights for 10 kilometers, Yang Yi said. This lap was different from a normal track. A normal track was 400 meters per lap, but a lap here was 500 meters or even more. So many laps? I'm probably tired to death from running a lap, and they're still carrying so many things. Murphy was shocked. She was also sitting on a small stool. She didn't feel bored. On the contrary, a group of people were running like a swarm of bees. They even made strange noises from time to time, which made the little girl watch with great interest. At this moment, when she heard her mother's words, she couldn't help but jump up from the small stool and run to her mother. The little girl grabbed her mother's knee and shook it while saying impatiently, Mom, let me tell you, I can run very far and I'm the fastest. I'm the best. You mean you're the best runner in class? Murphy asked curiously, but didn't you lose to someone else in the last competition? That's not the same. That competition was a two-person race. It was a competition of tacit understanding between two people. She and Xin Air's tacit understanding is still a little worse than that of the brother and sister. But she is really good at running. At her age, no other children can run faster than her, not even boys. Because she inherited your long legs. Yang Yi winked at Murphy and flattered his wife without leaving a trace. Before Mo Fei could give her a reproachful look, Cici, who was praised and recognized by her father, was overjoyed. The little girl smiled brightly, leaned on her mother's knee, and twisted her body. As if she couldn't control herself, she said, "Papa said that my legs are very long, so I can run fast, hee hee. The sun is very hot. It's not easy to run for so long." Mo Fei glanced at her daughter, whose forehead was covered with fine beads of sweat. As she spoke, she held her down, reached her hand behind the little girl's back, and said, "Cici, are you hot? Do you want to take off this sweater?" The little girl nodded eagerly, and then chattered about the example of how she ran better than other children in school. "Teacher Shan said that we should run, and then Chen Shiyun and I ran very fast, but Chen Shiyun was not as fast as me." Murphy took off Shishi's sweater and pulled the thick sweater from the little girl's head. The moment she took it off, Shishi's face was a little red because of the sweater. It was the kind of white with a hint of red, which looked very tempting. "Don't move, Mommy will help you tidy up your hair," Murphy said with a smile as she held down the little girl, who was moving around restlessly and giggling. Just as they were sitting in boredom, Zhang Lang's team finally finished their training. Yang Yi was counting silently. No more, no less, 20 laps. It seemed that nothing had changed after so many years. Of course, it was understandable. After all, it was only basic training. For the soldiers, this was just the beginning. It was just a small warm-up. After resting for 15 minutes, the soldiers took out water bottles from their backpacks to replenish their water. Shen Xinyu came out of the line and walked towards Yang Yi and the others. "Are you done with training?" Murphy asked curiously. "Done with training? How is that possible?" Shen Xinyu laughed and said, "We just started moving. Next, it's normal training." Shen Xinyu wasn't exaggerating at all. Moreover, he avoided the important points and said that Zhang Lang's normal training couldn't be considered as training in the base. In the base, they only maintained their usual physical fitness and skill training. They also had to learn other subjects, such as the mastery of pistols and rocket launchers, motorcycles and tanks, aircraft piloting, language learning, and so on. It was almost an all-round training. Of course, the real test was the field training outside the base. Every week, they had a 300-kilometer mountain road training and a 30 kilograms cross-country march training. Every month, there was also a wilderness survival training. They were often required to parachute from an altitude of 8,000 meters and land in the desolate mountains and forests of the southwest. They only had 3 days' worth of food on them, but they had to survive in the wild for 7 days. Not to mention, there were often missions such as catching drug dealers, encircling and suppressing militants who entered the border, and even crossing the border to rescue others. The competition between life and death was the meaning of their existence. Of course, at this time, there was no need to mention this in front of Yang Yi's wife and children. Shen Xinyu pointed to the strange equipment in the outer circle of the sports field. There were hooks, ladders, barbed wire, obstacles, and so on. Then he smiled and looked at Yang Yi and said, "Yang Yi, you used to be the record holder of this event. Can you still do it now?" Whoa, was this guy trying to goad him? However, this goading tactic was too low level, and Yang Yi saw through it completely. However, Yang Yi's hands were already itching. He smiled faintly and said, "What? Do you still want to challenge my record? Or do you think that my ability has regressed after not being in the army for so many years? Why don't we have a competition?" Shen Xinyu smiled mischievously and said, "I just think that you rarely come back. It's too boring to just sit on the side and watch. Why don't you come down and play with us? Of course, since you want to have a competition with me, I will reluctantly agree. Don't worry, I will go easy on you. After all, you haven't trained for more than 6 years. I won't bully you." "Hee hee, kid, your tone is getting bigger and bigger. Don't go easy on me. Come on, let's have a good competition." Yang Yi rubbed his hands and said in high spirits. Yang Yi seemed to have expected that there would be an opportunity to show off this afternoon. So, although he was not wearing a military uniform, he also changed into sportswear that was convenient for running. "Yang Yi, Murphy was a little worried. She hesitated and called out. It's okay. It's just a training with everyone. There won't be any danger. Yang-yi had to turn around and comforted Murphy. Then you have to be careful. Murphy had no choice but to gently nod her head and said, Papa, are you going to fight with Uncle Shin? At this time, she reacted. The little girl ran over and anxiously pulled her father's hand and said, Papa, I don't want you to fight. It's not a fight. It's the same as your race. Papa and Uncle Shen will climb on these equipment to see who can reach the finish line the fastest. Yang-yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he explained. Right, we won't fight. Don't worry, Shi, I won't touch your father's finger. Shen Sinyu revealed her white teeth and said with a grin. Shi pouted her mouth and turned her small head away. She didn't want to pay attention to Shen Sinyu. She seemed to be worried about her father. She felt that this bad Uncle Shen had dragged her father down. Don't worry, Papa will definitely win the competition and return triumphantly. Yang-yi squatted down, gently rubbed his daughter's small head and said, Don't you want Papa to win? I do. The little girl nodded. But. No buts, Papa already told you that there won't be any danger. Yang-yi said with a smile, Come on, give Papa some support. Yang-yi turned his face and raised his eyebrows at the little girl. Shi reluctantly came over, kissed her father's cheek, and muttered, Papa, you have to do your best. Listening to her slightly sad tone, it seemed that she was still worried about him. Yang-yi laughed, patted Shishi's small head, stood up, and said, Well, with Shishi's encouragement, Papa must beat Shen Sinyu today. Humph, you're bragging. Shen Sinyu snorted. Chapter 508. For the sake of fairness, Yang-yi gave Shen Sinyu some time to rest. Although for an expert like Shen Sinyu, the amount of training just now was nothing. Yang-yi, on the other hand, walked around the training ground to familiarize himself with the equipment that was still fresh in his memory. Hearing that these two guys were going to spar, the soldiers of Wolf Warriors were all excited. They ignored the sun and walked to the middle of the field, found a good position, and prepared to watch. Old Luo, help me carry the weight. Yang-yi walked a circle and returned to the starting point. He then stretched out his hand and said to Luo Zongxing. Luo Zongxing hesitated for a moment, then took off his backpack and handed it to Yang-yi. Full set. Yang-yi rolled his eyes and said angrily, Old Luo, are you looking down on me? Luo Zongxing shook his head, smiled bitterly and began to take off his bulletproof vest, tactical belt, gloves. Shoes are not necessary. Yang-yi was actually a little resistant to the sweaty bulletproof vest, but Luo Zongxing's combat boots, which had been worn countless times, was completely unacceptable. He quickly waved his hand and said, Give me the gun. Fortunately, the training gun was not a real gun, but a steel gun wrapped in plastic of the same weight. Luo Zongxing did not hesitate to take off his shoulder strap and handed over the rifle. The pistol had already been clipped to his tactical belt. After about 8 minutes of rest, Shen Sinyu adjusted her breathing, patted her chest, and turned to Yang-yi, who had already put on his helmet, and smiled, Come on, old Yang, let me see if you're still as good as before. Yang-yi slightly turned his face and looked at Shen Sinyu. With the gun on his back, he crossed his hands and twisted them, and there was a series of cracking sounds. The battle intent was unspoken. Luo Zongxing was still slightly out of breath, but he clapped his hands and said in a loud voice, Okay, you two go to your positions. Shao, time. Yu Shaotian nodded coldly, ran over, stood straight, pinched his watch, and then gestured that he was ready. Without further ado, Yang-yi and Shen Sinyu took their places. Luo Zongxing raised his right palm and shouted, Get ready. Begin. Luo Zongxing's voice fell at the same time as his palm blade. The fully armed Yang-yi and Shen Sinyu rushed out like arrows from a bow. First of all, he had to carry a large and heavy ammunition box and run for 50 meters. During this process, he had to face some tire obstacles. He didn't have to go around them. Instead, he had to step into the circle with every step he took. In this section, Yang Yi and Shen Xinyu were equally matched. Although Yang Yi was taller than Shen Xinyu, and it was reasonable to say that his long legs should have an advantage in running in a straight line, the obstacles were somewhat annoying. Often when Yang Yi started to speed up, they would cross in front of Yang Yi, forcing him to slow down. After all, Shen Xinyu had been training tirelessly. He was far more familiar with this field than Yang Yi, who could only find countermeasures in his memory. In the second section, although they could put down the ammunition box, the challenge had just begun. In front of them was a 6-meter-high vertical obstacle board. Both of them had to climb over this obstacle board, and then crawl over a 10-meter-long barbed wire fence. Almost at the same time, Shen Xinyu used both his hands and feet to grab the slits in the middle of the obstacle board and climbed up with all his might. However, Yang Yi didn't follow the rules. Yang Yi took a deep breath. When he was about 2 meters away, he suddenly kicked and jumped up. He stepped on the slits several times in a row, and with the momentum, he didn't fall back. At the last step, he suddenly exerted force. Just as his whole body was about to fall back, he grabbed the top of the obstacle board with both hands. This wasn't a special skill. If the obstacle board was a little shorter, Shen Xinyu could also do it. However, he didn't have Yang Yi's jumping ability and sharp and accurate judgment. Therefore, when he heard the movement next to him, Shen Xinyu, who had just climbed halfway, turned his head to look. Damn, old Yang can fly. He didn't hesitate. He also took a deep breath, jumped up again, and sped up his climbing speed. When Shen Xinyu grabbed the top, Yang Yi had already turned over, grabbed the top, and jumped down. When he landed, he held the gun in his arms and rolled sideways to reduce the force. Ah! Murphy couldn't help but exclaim when she saw Yang Yi jump down from a height of more than 4 meters. However, Shi, who was next to her, was not afraid at all. She just opened her eyes wide and looked at her father's natural and unrestrained strength. The expression of worship on her face seemed to have said the words in her heart. Papa is so powerful. Yang Yi got into the barbed wire a second faster than Shen Xinyu. With his elbows, he moved left and right, and crawled on the ground full of yellow soil. Even so, his clothes were still hooked. Although he wasn't injured, his sports jacket was cut open. Damn it! Yang Yi secretly cursed. He was not satisfied with himself. In the barbed wire area, Shen Xinyu crawled faster. He was like a loach, twisting in the soil. After a few moves, he overtook Yang Yi and got out of the 10-meter-long barbed wire area first. The next few levels were to rush across the single-plank bridge and climb over a 10-meter-long bar with a slight slope. In these 2 levels, Yang Yi and Shen Xinyu were competing with each other, overtaking and being overtaken. In the end, they were only neck and neck. It seemed that they had returned to a new starting line. So powerful. Some of the recruits of Zhang Lang next to him, as well as some veterans who were unfamiliar with Yang Yi's physical condition, were dumbfounded. Originally, Shen Xinyu's skills were already one of the best in Zhang Lang. Now, there was a veteran who had retired for more than 6 years who forced him to go all out and was even on par with him? What kind of monster is this? A recruit couldn't help but mutter to his brother next to him, if he didn't retire and trained every day, wouldn't he be invincible? The next level was a good opportunity for Yang Yi to win points. He and Shen Xinyu carried the trunk that was as tall as a person and as thick as a thigh almost at the same time. They put it on their shoulders and necks, then hooked their hands and rushed into the 1-meter-deep and 20-meter-long pool. No, it should be said that it was half a quagmire. The water inside was dyed into mud by the surrounding yellow soil. Yang Yi had just steadied himself in the quagmire when he heard Shi's crisp voice not far away. "Papa, you can do it." Yang Yi turned his head. It turned out that this place was the closest to Murphy and Shi. Murphy and Shi stood up nervously from the small stools and looked at him. Yang Yi looked at his daughter's worried and excited little face. His sweaty and muddy face also revealed a smile. He responded, "Okay. You can do it." Shen Xinyu didn't turn his head. He kept rushing forward, stepping on the mud while panting. He shouted intermittently, at this time, if you're still distracted, you'll lose. Yang Yi turned around and chased after him. His footsteps were steady. He couldn't take big steps in the mud, but his speed gradually increased. Is that so? But for me, it's too easy to win against you. When the two of them were chasing each other in the quagmire, a military vehicle slowly stopped in the big field. A middle-aged soldier with shining military stars on his shoulder and two soldiers got out of the vehicle. Luo Zongxing heard the movement, turned his head, and quickly turned to greet him. Hello, Chief. Zhang Yazhong was the Chief of Staff of the Southwest Military Region. He was also the leader in charge of this military region and Luo Zongxing's immediate superior. He looked with interest at Yang Yi, who was competing with Shen Xinyu in the field. Yang Yi's outfit, although fully armed, but the sportswear and sneakers still clearly showed his identity. This is Yang Yi. I've reported to you before. It's rare for him to come back. Shen also wanted to find someone to compare notes with, so Yang Yi came down. Luo Zongxing said. Yang Yi is not ordinary now. He's a big star, and he's been retired for 6 years. Looking at Shen's posture, I'm afraid he's going to lose. You have to train harder in the future. Zhang Yazhong said seriously to Luo Zongxing. Yes. Luo Zongxing said with his legs crossed. Those two are Yang Yi's family, right? Zhang Yazhong looked at Murphy and Shi under the shade of the tree. After Luo Zongxing nodded, he smiled and said, If I remember correctly, Yang Yi's wife is also a big star. It's rare for our military region to welcome 2 singing stars. We have to seize this opportunity. Chapter 509. There was a clear gap between Yang Yi and Shen Xinyu. Yang Yi's strength was greater than Shen Xinyu's. In the part of carrying the log across the quagmire, which did not require much skill, Yang Yi was ahead of Shen Xinyu by nearly 2 seconds. And then, in the climbing of the net wall and the descent of the rope, Yang Yi also firmly maintained this 2-second advantage, which made Shen Xinyu unable to pursue him. In the last 50 meters of the snake's sprint around the obstacles, Yang Yi slowly pulled away from Shen Xinyu and finally rushed to the finish line. Yeah. Yang Yi held the rifle in his left hand, his right hand with dirty gloves clenched into a fist, and excitedly waved at Shi, who just cheered for him. It seemed that he was proudly showing to his daughter, See, this is your father. It seemed that Yang Yi used almost all his strength to fight with Shen Xinyu. He was not fighting for any glory, nor was he trying to steal the limelight. He just wanted to prove in front of his daughter that her father was the best. Shi could also understand that her father won. The little girl was jumping and jumping beside her mother. She was as happy as a lark jumping among the green leaves. Brother, the sword is not old. King admire you this time. Shen Xinyu used all her strength. At the moment, she was panting with her hands on her waist. She shook her head and said to Yang Yi. Retracting his gaze from his daughter, Yang Yi laughed. He walked over and picked Shen Xinyu up. The rifles in front of them made muffled sounds of collision. It was very loud. You're not bad either. You force me to fight with my life on the line. Yang Yi smiled and patted Shen Xinyu's shoulder. What's the point of fighting with your life on the line? It's embarrassing if I lose. I train every day and I can't compare to you, a retired veteran. Shen Xinyu was somewhat depressed. I just won by luck. Didn't you see that you overtook me several times before? You won by height, although my legs are long, haha. Yang Yi seemed to be proud of himself as he comforted her. Haha, if that's the case, I have to find a basketball player to compete with you. Shen Xinyu couldn't help but laugh. At this moment, a clear voice came from behind, Papa. It turned out to be Shi. The little girl couldn't wait to run over from the shade of the tree. Murphy couldn't stop her. She couldn't run, so she could only follow behind quickly. Shi ran over and excitedly wanted her father to hug her. However, Yang Yi hurriedly took off his gloves and stopped Shi with his palm, which was relatively clean. He pointed at his dusty and muddy clothes and equipment and said with a smile, You can't hug me now. Look at how dirty I am. I'll dirty your little dress later. She had to give up, but she was still very excited. She clapped her hands happily and twisted her little body, unable to stop. She called out in a childish voice, "Papa, Papa, do you know you've won? I saw that you were the first to run over." Yang Yi couldn't help laughing. He snickered and said seriously, "Really, thank you Shishi, for telling me that you've observed me very carefully. It's true. Uncle Shen is too slow. He can't even compare to Papa. Papa is super powerful." The little girl beside her father bounced and said. Shen Sinyu's face was black, but looking at this cute little girl, she couldn't even think of blaming her. She could only helplessly look at the sky. Murphy came over, but before she could talk to Yang Yi, Luo Zongxing came over with Zhang Yazhong. When Shen Sinyu heard the commotion, she turned around and hurriedly saluted with her legs together. Zhang Yazhong also raised his hand and saluted back. He smiled and said, "Little Shen, in the future, you have to work hard in training. Don't slack off after winning the championship in the international competition. The competition is secondary. Our mission is to always be prepared for the safety of our country's territory and the safety of our people's property." Shen Sinyu's expression was very awkward at this moment, but he still responded neatly, "Yes." Yang Yi frowned slightly. He saw the general star on Zhang Yazhong's shoulder and secretly regretted it. He seemed to have been a little too serious just now. Why didn't he see a general passing by? He even caused his brother to be scolded. If he had known, he would have gone easy on him. Zhang Yazhong didn't continue to scold him. Instead, he turned his head and looked at Yang Yi with a smile. He stretched out his hand and said, "You're Yang Yi, right?" "Yes. Hello, Chief." Yang Yi was stunned for a moment. He learned the habit of saluting and then stretched out his hand, which was held by the other party. Luo Zongxing smiled and said, "Yang Yi, let me introduce you. This is General Zhang Yazhong, the Chief of Staff of our Southwest Military Region." So it's him. Yang Yi had heard Luo Zongxing mention him before. He used a little strength to shake Zhang Yazhong's hand and said with a smile, "So it's General Zhang. Thank you for helping to restore my military status in Zhonlang, even though I've already retired." Zhang Yazhong laughed and said, "Let's not talk about the past. I'm very pleased to see that the outstanding talents from Zhonlang, even if they're not serving in the army, are still shining in society and showing the spirit of Zhonlang." Sure enough, officials were good at talking. They were able to connect everything together. Yang Yi wasn't used to such empty words, so he could only continue to smile. "Chief, you're right. When we saw Yang Yi last year, we thought that it was a pity that he didn't come back to Zhonlang with his skills. I didn't expect that he would quietly do such a big thing outside." Luo Zongxing was able to deal with it easily and said with a smile, "I think that's a good thing. Look at Yang Yi." After he left Zhonlang, he wrote, "Soldiers' assault, right?" It perfectly showed many of the excellent qualities of our soldiers. The sentence that left the deepest impression on me was, "Don't abandon, don't give up." Right. When I was at a meeting at the beginning of the year, I heard from others that after this book was released, the people praised the army a lot more. This is Little Yang's contribution. Zhang Yazhong said. Yang Yi was still smiling stiffly. On the other hand, Luo Zongxing and Zhang Yazhong praised Yang Yi to the heavens. Zhang Yazhong said excitedly, "I think that our army can also use Little Yang as a representative to vigorously promote his excellent deeds. On one hand, it's a form of encouragement for the soldiers. On the other hand, it's also a way for the people to see that our soldiers continue to shine and contribute to society, whether before or after retirement." Luo Zongxing raised a little objection. "Chief, our identities in Zhonlang are quite special and need to be strictly confidential. Isn't it inappropriate to expose it to the public? This may cause some trouble for Yang Yi and his family." Yang Yi raised his eyebrows slightly and looked at Zhang Yazhong. He wanted to know what kind of response this chief of staff, who had a lot of ideas, would have. "What you said makes sense." Zhang Yazhong was still very considerate of his subordinates. He nodded and said to Yang Yi, "This may cause little Yang to be wronged. We can hide little Yang's true identity and just let him be an excellent soldier of the Southwest Military Region for publicity." Luo Zongxing thought about it carefully and felt that it was feasible. He smiled and said to Yang Yi, "What do you think? The publicity of the army will also be beneficial to you." Luo Zongxing kept winking at Yang Yi, wanting Yang Yi to agree. Yang Yi was not stupid. He knew that they were doing this for his own good. After all, with the army supporting him, those monsters and the gossip media would have to think twice if they wanted to mess with him. Of course, he still had to say some polite words. Although he felt awkward, Yang Yi still nodded and said, "Thank you for your concern, Chief. If the army needs it, of course I won't refuse." Zhang Yazhong nodded with satisfaction and said with a smile, "There's no need to be so tragic. Our Southwest Military Region and the Chinese People's Army only need to establish a positive image to bring the strength of an example to everyone. And you are no longer a soldier. As for the appearance fees and endorsement fees, our Military Region's art team will discuss it with you in detail." "How can that be? Of course it's free. Zhanlang and the Southwest Military Region are my other hometown. It's only right to contribute a little to my hometown," Yang Yi said quickly. After Zhang Yazhong and Yang Yi finished speaking, he looked at Murphy and said with a smile, "Mrs. Yang, you are also a big star. We are honored that you came to the Southwest Military Region." Mo Fei, who had been standing behind Yang Yi with CC like an invisible person, was stunned for a moment. It was the first time she was called Mrs. Yang by someone. She was very happy and showed a smile. "Chief, you flatter me. To be honest, our Southwest Military Region, especially our military region now, is relatively remote and not very safe. Usually, the country organizes the next company performance for the big stars, and it's not our turn." Zhang Yazhong sighed and said, "So, it's really the first time I've seen a big star, and it's a big star. It's like a dream." Luo Zongxing said with a smile, "Yes, it's the first time, Chief. Not to mention the stars, even the art team of the military region rarely comes." Murphy was a little confused. She vaguely felt that they were hinting at something. "Chief, what do you mean?" Yang Yi also felt it and took the initiative to ask. Chapter 5:10. "Hey, don't move. Let me see if you're hurt." In the evening, Murphy's anxious voice came from the room of the guest house. Murphy held down Yang Yi, who was about to take off his clothes to take a shower, and gently pulled open the sportswear and trousers that had been cut open by the iron wire with a worried look. Even Cece covered her small mouth and stood at the side with a shocked expression when she saw the messy hole that looked as if it had been robbed. Because he had been covered by the bulletproof vest, the cuts were either on his arms or his thighs. After checking his arms, Murphy squatted down again and carefully turned Yang Yi's trousers to see if there were any bloody wounds on the inner thighs. But this posture was a bit too. Some strange thoughts came to Yang Yi's mind. However, when he glanced at she next to him, he felt embarrassed. Ahem. He pulled Mo Fei up and said helplessly, "I'm not injured. It's just that my clothes are torn. I'm fine inside. Look, I'm still alive and kicking. Do you think I'm an injured person?" She shook her head and said, "No, Papa, if I'm hurt, it'll be very painful. Then I'll want Papa to hug me." Yang Yi snapped his fingers, pointed at his daughter, and said with a smile, "Yes. But I'm not in so much pain that I can't walk, right?" She was no longer worried. She smiled and nodded to her father. Murphy didn't notice that something was wrong with her actions just now. She was not completely relieved. She stood up and walked behind Yang Yi. She tiptoed and turned over Yang Yi's collar, and said worriedly, "What about here? Is there a wound behind your hair?" This was the first place that was hooked. "Well, look, there's no injury, right?" Looking at Murphy's worried look, Yang Yi simply took off his sportswear and vest, turned around, and showed it to Murphy. Cece blinked and reacted a little sluggishly. After a while, she covered her eyes with her two little hands and pouted her little mouth as she shouted, "Papa is not wearing clothes. I'm ashamed." Although she mischievously covered her eyes, Yang Yi could see that the little girl's fingers were spread open, and through the gap, he could see her beautiful smiling eyes. Sometimes, when Yang Yi called her to sleep, she would cover her eyes and say that she was asleep. However, this was also a little trick that Yang Yi was very familiar with. Mo Fei, however, believed it. After confirming that Yang Yi was not injured, she breathed a sigh of relief. Then, she pushed Yang Yi to the bathroom and said with a smile, "Hurry up and take a shower. Stop showing off your muscles. You see, even she is scolding you. Hey, she's pretending. Let me tell you, this little girl is getting more and more naughty." Yang Yi's resistance was suppressed. Amidst she and Murphy's laughter, he was locked in the bathroom. When Yang Yi came out of the shower, Murphy was excitedly holding a set of women's military uniform and playing with it in front of her. The clothes were sent by the army. In order to let Yang Yi and Murphy complete the performance tonight, they sent 2 sets of brand new military uniforms, which were selected according to Yang Yi and Murphy's sizes. Zhang Yazhong's ultimate goal was to invite Yang Yi and Murphy to perform for the soldiers. Of course, because it was rushed, it was impossible to make a full party. However, the army also had a training program at night. After training, each class would sometimes play songs with each other, which could be considered as enriching everyone's boring training life. At this time, Yang Yi and Murphy would go out and sing for the soldiers. However, it couldn't be pop songs, it had to be military songs. Because it wasn't pop songs, and Murphy didn't have any military songs in her repertoire, Yang Yi couldn't teach her a new song at the last minute. However, Murphy still knew some of the more famous military songs, so she picked a female song that she was more familiar with. It seemed to be called something like, "The Army's Moonlight." There were many men in the army, so Yang Yi also picked 2 military songs to sing for the soldiers. "The clothes are here. Try it on." Yang Yi hadn't seen Murphy in a military uniform yet, so he excitedly urged her. "It's here, but it's a pity that there isn't one for she. Murphy said to Yang Yi with some regret. There was no other way. After all, she was too young. There were female soldiers in the army, but not a 4-year-old female soldier. However, she shook her head and said, "I don't want it. I want to wear my clothes. My dress is the best." Yang Yi shook his head and smiled at Murphy. "It's okay. If you really want to wear it, I'll get someone to cut camouflage cloth and make a few. They'll be tailor-made. It'll definitely fit better than this." As he spoke, Yang Yi suddenly thought that he could start a family photography business. Every year, he would set a time for the whole family to wear the same clothes, a parent-child style, and take a group photo. It was similar to cosplay. It should be very interesting. Murphy didn't waste any time. She took the military uniform to the bathroom to change. However, it took a long time. After Yang Yi and she finished talking about the dangerous parts of today's competition, a neatly dressed Murphy slowly walked out. Yang Yi couldn't help but feel his eyes light up. Murphy, who was wearing the camouflage uniform, stood in front of him. The uniform, which was originally a little loose, was supported by her tall and slender figure. Her somewhat plump chest appeared a little bulging, but he could still see her graceful figure. Murphy didn't put on any makeup at this time. She, who was barefaced, had a kind of light beauty that was like a lotus emerging from clear water. She wasn't charming, but she was graceful and pure. The only flaw was that Mo Fei's hair was a bit fashionable. Her long hair was spread out, and she did not look like a soldier's hair. The slight curl at the end of her hair and the shyness on her face also made her look less heroic and more tender. "Come, I'll help you tie up your hair." Yang Yi asked Murphy to sit over and then helped her tie up her hair. It was like the hair of a female guard of honor, coiling it into a neat and beautiful ball. "Put on the cap and take a look." Yang Yi handed the military cap to Murphy and then pulled her to the disciplinary mirror. He pointed at the valiant female soldier and smiled. "How is it?" Of course, without looking at her expression, Murphy was indeed an outstanding female soldier. Wearing the military uniform, she had a kind of handsomeness that women couldn't resist. Just looking at her expression, Murphy became a gentle woman. Even if she wore the military uniform, she was still a rose in the gun, still weak and delicate. It couldn't be helped. After Murphy got together with Yang Yi, she lost a lot of her cold and tough temperament. Not to mention that she was now embarrassed by Yang Yi's gaze. Her shy expression didn't look scary at all. But she was stunned. When her mother came out of the bathroom, the little girl had been looking at her mother in astonishment. She seemed to find it hard to believe that her mother would look so good in such an ugly color. What do you think? Murphy was overjoyed to receive Yang Yi's praise. When Yang Yi went to change, she couldn't help but ask her daughter, "Mom is so beautiful." She said enviously. She didn't know what words to use to describe it, but it could also express her meaning. "Really?" Murphy asked happily. "But didn't you say that you don't like this kind of clothes?" But I thought it wasn't good." She didn't know how to answer. She pouted her mouth and said, "It's better now." Mofei smiled and said, "Are you saying that Mama's clothes look good?" "I like Mom wearing it. Mom looks good in it." She tried her best to explain. "Thank you, she. It's a pity that there are no children's clothes or military uniforms similar to yours." Murphy said regretfully again, "Mom thinks that it would be great if there were. That way, she can also wear beautiful clothes like Mom, right? It'll be cool." The frowning little girl was actually still pondering. Finally, she thought of a word. Her eyes lit up and she said excitedly, "Who did you say was cool?" Yang Yi changed his clothes relatively quickly. His movements seemed to be imprinted in his mind. After a while, he came out. Just then, he heard Shi's words and asked with a smile. It was also the first time that she saw her father in a military uniform. After seeing her father put on the camouflage uniform, he looked capable and neat. His spirit and appearance seemed to be renewed. She couldn't help but look at him again and again. "Is Papa or Mom cooler?" Murphy asked with a smile. "Papa is cool." She said casually and turned to look at Murphy. She wavered again. The little girl said hesitantly, "But Mom is cooler." "Are you serious? Your mom is cooler?" Yang Yi teased his daughter and said with a smile, "Which part is cooler?" "I don't know." She pouted. She buried her head in her father's arms and twisted. "Papa, don't ask me, okay?" Chapter 5:11. At around 8 o'clock in the evening, a row of troops that had finished their training ran forward in unison and drove into the large square in front of the main building. They would sometimes gather here to listen to the guidance of the chief or watch patriotic movies. Many activities would be held in this large square. Today, Chief Zhang Yazhong made a summary of tonight's training. After performing or criticizing, he introduced Yang Yi and Murphy to the soldiers. Of course, he did not tell them that Yang Yi used to be a member of Wolf Warriors. He only told the soldiers that the author of the novels they liked to read, Soldier's Assault and Drawing Sword, Yang Yi used to be a soldier in the Southwest Military Region, just like the soldiers present. It had to be said that after Zhang Yazhong's emotional introduction, the faces of the soldiers present were flushed, as if they were proud to be in the same unit as Yang Yi. "Today, it's rare for two big stars in the music industry to come to our place, so I invited them to sing for our soldiers," Zhang Yazhong said. Hearing this, there was a small commotion in the audience, but after all, they were a disciplined army. Although the soldiers were excited, they did not make a loud noise. They just followed and applauded hard. Zhang Yazhong ordered the troops to remove the requirement to sit upright. They only needed to sit in their own positions and no other requirements were made. At this moment, the atmosphere began to liven up. Murphy sang first. Murphy, who was a popular singer 6 years ago, still had a lot of fame among the soldiers after the information comparison. Therefore, when Murphy went on stage, she also received thunderous applause. Murphy was a little nervous when she went on stage. After all, she was facing thousands of soldiers, not ordinary fans. However, after she started singing, she got into the mood and was no longer affected by the environment. It was the song, Army's Moonlight. With her excellent singing skills and clear voice, Mo Fei perfectly performed this slightly high-pitched song, which made the soldiers feel intoxicated. It was not until Yang Yi came to the stage to speak that they finally came back to their senses. Obviously, the soldiers did not know that Yang Yi, who was not famous in the music industry, could sing. This was introduced by Zhang Yazhong, so at first, everyone looked at Yang Yi with suspicion. Can he sing? Or, just like how we usually sing, we can just shout at the top of our lungs. Today, I'm going to sing 2 songs for our comrades without accompaniment. Because they're new military songs that I've written and haven't released yet, I can't find any accompaniment. The chief's order came rather abruptly, and I was also in a hurry to go on stage. I can only sing once for everyone. I hope everyone will like it. Yang Yi did not mind. He waited for Murphy to come down and help take care of Shi. Then, he came up with the microphone. A cappella. It was becoming more and more like they were singing. The first song is called The Soldier. I hope to tell everyone my understanding of the army and soldiers through this song. After Yang Yi finished speaking, he prepared for a while and began to sing. What's so different about us soldiers? It's just because we all wear plain military uniforms. What's so different about us soldiers? Ever since we left our hometown, it's hard for us to see our parents. Yang Yi skipped the prelude and began singing directly. His loud and rhythmic voice spread through the audience through the sound system. The first line, that firm and powerful high-pitched voice, instantly made the soldiers in the audience feel refreshed. That obvious rhythm seemed to have a warm current surging in their hearts. Yes, not to mention how touching the lyrics were, just the singing alone was enough to make their blood boil. Below the stage, Murphy, who was holding Shi's hand, was also surprised. She looked at Yang Yi on the stage and could not help but praise Yang Yi in her heart. At this moment, Yang Yi's tenor voice was too good. There was no modification at all. It was completely Yang Yi's original voice. Murphy knew that Yang Yi's original voice was the most suitable for this kind of military song. It's not the same to say it's different, but it's actually the same. We're all youthful, hot-blooded men. It's not the same to say it's different, but it's actually the same. The same footprints are left behind, the mountains are high and the rivers are long. If the beginning was steel, then Yang Yi's voice was now mixed with softness. In the high pitch of, it's not the same to say it's different, but it's actually the same, Yang Yi sang so softly that the soldiers below the stage could not help but be moved. This song was not just a high-pitched voice. Its lyrics were written really well. Gradually, after they began to understand the meaning of Yang Yi's song, the soldiers seemed to have found a soulmate in this song. Listen, we soldiers are indeed different. Our heads rest on the bright moon of the border, our bodies are covered in rain, snow, wind, and frost. Didn't such lyrics have the same effect as Wang Chongling's Leaving the Fortress? The bright moon of the Qin dynasty and the Han dynasty, the long march has not ended. Only soldiers like them who were truly stationed at the border of their motherland, the southwest border, knew what kind of sadness the border scenery described by these lyrics was. However, this was not strange. Yang Yi used to be one of them, and he was also really stationed at the border. He rested his head on the bright moon of the border and experienced the continuous rainy season and winter wind and frost of the border. Otherwise, how could he write Soldiers' Assault and Soldiers, such works that were so close to reality? It's not the same to say it's different, but it's actually the same. They're all yearning for glory, and they're all winning glory. It's not the same to say it's different, but it's actually the same. The same style flying on the flag of the Republic. This song was full of positive energy. Yang Yi sang it enthusiastically, and the soldiers below the stage also listened with passion. They were full of energy. It was as if they had found the affirmation they longed for from this song. Soldiers are no different from ordinary people, but we bear the responsibility of guarding the peace of the country, we bear the responsibility of protecting the safety of the people, we shed our blood on the land of the motherland's border, and we live up to the expectations of our fellow villagers. Especially these lyrics, the soldiers thought of the red flag flying every day, and their youth fluttering in the wind like the national flag, and they couldn't help but tear up. This kind of feeling might be difficult for outsiders to understand, but only they knew how exciting it was to be recognized by others in the boring training, sentry duty, and battle. For the peace of the country, we hold the guns in our hands tightly. We soldiers are like this. Finally, in Yang Yi's high-pitched singing, the song slowly came to an end. But just like the soldier's feeling of wanting more, Zhang Yazhong, who was listening attentively, also turned his head and said to Luo Zongxing, "Just now, Xiaoyang said that this song was written by him, right? I don't think I've heard it before. If such a classic military song existed in this world, it would be impossible for it not to be sought after by soldiers." Luo Zongxing smiled and nodded. Yes, today, Yang Yi said that he would sing 2 songs. Both military songs were written by him, and they haven't been released before. Such a multi-talented soldier is the treasure of our army, Zhang Yazhong said with emotion. Xiaoyang is so outstanding. If we don't promote him, who else can we promote? Let everyone see that the soldiers who came out of our army are also so good that there's nothing to say. Luo Zongxing smiled and nodded. He was also proud of Yang Yi in his heart. There's one more song. This song may be a little emotional. Yang Yi calmed down his emotions from singing just now and said to the soldiers with a smile. Chapter 5:12. The song, Soldier, ignited a sense of pride in the hearts of the soldiers present. One by one, they sat on the small bench, puffed out their chests, and looked excited, as if they were going to the battlefield. Soldier was so good, which proved that Yang Yi's composing ability in military songs was not bad. Then there was a new song, and everyone was looking forward to it. Yang Yi stood on the stage and said as if he was chatting, "When I come back here, I will think of the time when I was stationed at the remote border like everyone else. At that time always passed very quickly. Spring, summer, autumn, and winter passed in the blink of an eye, and then another year passed. Often, for a few years, I would spend the holidays with my comrades, but when I looked at the moon in the sky, I would often think of my distant hometown, and my parents at home." He paused and sang with deep emotion, "To be honest, I also miss home. My old mother at home has a head full of white hair." Although there was no accompaniment, Yang Yi sang a little like a bel canto. It sounded as if he had integrated the melody of the accompaniment, and the tone was rich. Even if they couldn't tell the singing level of the singer, they would be moved by the gentle rhythm in the song, as if they had imagined the accompaniment. And just like Soldier, the lyrics of this song were very simple, like chatting, and it aroused the emotional resonance of the soldiers. "To be honest, I also have love. I often miss her in my dreams, her in my dreams." Hearing this, the eyes of many soldiers became complicated. They were brought into their deeply buried longing by Yang Yi's singing. Family, love, in this place, seemed to be very far away. Even if the communication method was very convenient now, most of the soldiers' homes were in remote villages. There was no phone at home, so it was inconvenient. Sometimes, they really didn't have time, or they were training or going on missions, so they were so busy that they forgot. They almost didn't call home for 10 days or half a month. Besides, even if the communication was convenient, calling still couldn't solve the feelings of missing home. This military camp was basically full of veterans, but even so, during the holidays, when they were alone and quiet, they would still cry. Of course, men did not easily shed tears. Even though the hearts of the soldiers below the stage were already churning with emotions, they did not tear up because of this aroused emotion. At most, they just looked forward with determination and held back the tears in their eyes. Not to mention the ordinary soldiers, even Zhang Yazhong, Luo Zongxing, and the other high-ranking officers sitting below the stage had complicated emotions in their eyes. Zhang Yazhong was still fine. His family had moved to Spring City, so it was not difficult for them to meet. Even so, he did not have much time to spend with his family and children. Not to mention, he had once been an ordinary soldier, so he knew what it was like. Luo Zongsheng was just like Zhang Lang's brothers. Just like what Yang Yi said, he often didn't go home to visit his family for several years. Didn't Shen Xinyu tease him that only his sister-in-law came to visit him and he didn't go back to visit his family? With him wholeheartedly devoted to Zhang Lang, how could he have the time to create a human? Behind them, the low-key warriors of the wolf troop, including the carefree Shen Xinyu, were also filled with emotions. She couldn't cry. If she cried, she would be ridiculed. Shen Xinyu couldn't help but curse in her heart, this bastard Yang Yi. However, just as they thought that Yang Yi would continue to stir up emotions, Yang Yi suddenly raised his voice again. Come, come, come. Since you're here to be a soldier, come, come, come. You know that you have a great responsibility. If you don't carry a gun, I won't carry a gun. Who will protect our mother? Who will protect her? Who will protect her? This line seemed to have struck a chord in everyone's heart. If you don't carry a gun, I won't carry a gun. If everyone shirked this responsibility, then this country would not be as peaceful as it was now. Thinking of this, the grievances in the hearts of the soldiers seemed to have disappeared without a trace. Only a heavy sense of responsibility was left in their hearts. Although the lyrics were about protecting one's mother, the motherland's mother was still a mother. Moreover, if one could not protect the motherland's mother, how could they protect their own mother? Because there was no accompaniment, Yang Yi only paused for a moment before jumping over and continuing to sing. To be honest, I'm not stupid. I know that the road to the army is stormy. To be honest, I also have feelings. The fireworks in the human world raised me. The second paragraph was not as profound as the first paragraph, and it also lacked the urge to burst into tears upon hearing it. However, it did not matter. At this moment, the soldiers had already shouldered the responsibility on their shoulders. They had also preserved the tenderness and longing in their hearts. Come, 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 come. Although that's the case, come, 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 only when there's a country can there be a home. If you don't stand guard, I won't stand guard. Who will protect our motherland? Who will protect our home? Yang Yi's high-pitched singing seemed to inject a valiant energy into the soldiers once again. All of them puffed out their chests. Yes, only when there's a country can there be a home. They were the first line of defense of the motherland. They protected the motherland and also protected their home. Only they could shoulder this heavy responsibility. No matter how hot and humid this place was, no matter how dangerous the forest was, no matter how many wind and rain, no matter how many snake beasts there were on the road, they stood guard here and protected the safety of the country. Who will protect home? In the end, under the gaze of thousands of soldiers, Yang Yi used a vigorous and long high-pitched voice to end the song. However, the long high-pitched voice at the end was really surprising. Murphy could not help but open her mouth. She was stunned by Yang Yi's performance. It was really amazing. Murphy did not expect that Yang Yi's high-pitched voice could reach such a level. It was like a real high-pitched singer. His breath was even longer than the others. He did not even need to take a breath. Murphy felt very comfortable listening to it. Next, naturally, Yang Yi and Murphy could not only sing. The soldiers also had to sing. When it came to singing military songs, they had also been honed by singing night after night. 123, quick, quick, 1 2 3 4 5, we waited so hard, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, we waited so anxiously. Wax gourd skin, watermelon skin, XXX row is not allowed to act shamelessly. Under the leadership of a few company commanders, the soldiers also sang the military songs that they were more familiar with. Although they did not have any singing skills, there was only one word, roar. The louder they roared, the more mighty and majestic they looked. Murphy, who was sitting next to Yang Yi, could not help but tug at Yang Yi's clothes. She smiled and whispered to him, I finally understand why you sang in that tone at that time. It's because you're used to roaring. After the meeting, Yang Yi was preparing to bring Murphy and the sleepy she back to the guest house to rest. Zhang Yazhong came over with a few of the higher-ups in the army. He was still not satisfied and asked Yang Yi if there was a CD of the two songs that he sang tonight. However, they were disappointed. Yang Yi's 2 songs had not been released yet. That won't do. Little Yang, when you go back, you have to hurry up and record these 2 songs. These 2 military songs are very good. I've listened to so many songs, but I've never seen these 2 songs that moved me so much. Zhang Yazhong instructed habitually. Little Yang, release them as soon as possible so that we can organize the art troupe to learn them and let them teach the soldiers. The regiment commander of the artillery regiment smiled and said, "Look, everyone liked it tonight. If they learn it, they will definitely sing it every day." It was rare for Yang Yi to hear a conversation between leaders that was not empty talk. He smiled and said, "Yes, I promise to complete the mission." Chapter 513. After all, the army was the army, not a friend's home. Yang Yi came back for a day and met his old comrade. The next morning, after breakfast, they were ready to go back. Before they left, Yang Yi hugged his brothers one by one and said goodbye. When it was Shen Sinyu's turn, he took out a tank made of bullet casings from behind him. It wasn't very big, only about the size of Yang Yi's palm. The body of the tank was golden. It was obvious that Shen Sinyu had carefully selected the well-preserved bullet casings and polished off the black stains on the bullet casings. That was why it was so beautiful. Under the sunlight, it even reflected a dazzling light. "Old Yang, this tank is for your daughter to play with." Shen Sinyu stuffed it into Yang Yi's hands and said without any explanation. Yang Yi was stunned. Giving such a toy to Shi to play with? However, the important thing wasn't the gift, but Shen Sinyu's intention. Yang Yi smiled and hugged Shen Sinyu. He patted his shoulder and said, "Good brother. Sorry for last night, you were scolded by the chief." Yang Yi lowered his voice and said. However, Shen Sinyu raised his eyebrows and raised his chin slightly. He said proudly, "My skills are not as good as others, so I deserve to be scolded. What are you apologizing for? If we're brothers, you should let me see my own shortcomings." Yang Yi smiled and patted Shen Sinyu's shoulder. When he returned to Murphy and Shi's side, they were already waiting in the waiting room at the entrance of the military camp. Yang Yi took out the tank and said with a smile, Shi, look, this is a gift from Uncle Shen." Wow! The little girl didn't know if it was because the tank was exquisitely made or because she was attracted by the bright golden light. She ran out from her mother's side in surprise. Her eyes were shining as if she had seen a rare treasure. Shi's reaction was a little out of Yang Yi's expectations. Yang Yi thought that she would not be interested in this kind of boy's toy. After all, when he usually took her to buy toys, Cici would choose dolls and plush toys that little girls like to play with, or mini kitchens and mini nurse outfits that were used for playing house. "Does Shi like it?" Yang Yi handed it to Shi and said, "You have to be careful. After all, it's glued. It may break if it falls to the ground." Shi didn't even pay attention to him. She grabbed the heavy cartridge tank with both hands and looked at it happily. She looked at it carefully and couldn't bear to let go. Yang Yi even heard the young lady mumbling as she looked at the tank. "Do you want to forgive Uncle Shen? He fought with Papa, but Uncle Shen lost to Papa. Then, Uncle Shen gave me a beautiful car. I'm not angry anymore. Uncle Shen is a good person." Yang Yi couldn't help but laugh and shake his head at this little kid's logic. However, Yang Yi could roughly understand that she didn't like this gift because of the tank. She should like the color and the exquisite appearance. "Papa, can I put it at home and let Xian Air come to my house to see it?" She raised her head and held the cartridge tank with her two small hands and said happily to her father, "Of course." Yang Yi nodded. Did Shen Sinyu go back? He gave Shi such a valuable gift, but she didn't even say thank you to Uncle Shen. Murphy came over and looked at the cartridge tank in Shi's hand. She felt very sorry. He went back. They still have a task. It's not a valuable gift, just some cartridge shells. Usually, a lot of discarded cartridge shells are left when shooting. You can get a lot of them from the management. Yang Yi said with a smile, and I also thanked him on behalf of she. It's not a matter of whether it's expensive or not. It's not easy for him to make this handicraft, and your gratitude is different from she's personal gratitude. Murphy said. Mom, what are you talking about? She held the cartridge tank for a while and felt a little tired. She took her father's hand and asked him to hold it for her. Yang-yi took it with his left hand and rubbed she's little head with his right hand. He said with a smile, "Your mother said that you should say thank you to Uncle Shen. This is what you should do. But Uncle Shen has gone back now. Let's call him next time and say thank you." Yang-yi drove the rented car and took Murphy and she back to Spring City. Along the way, they sang and danced. Looking at the spring forest outside the car window and the flower fields of the special villages along the way, she was so excited that she couldn't stop. She sang the song "Where is Spring" dozens of times. Yang-yi and Murphy were about to vomit, but she was still happy and didn't get tired. She even dragged Murphy to sing with her. "How about this? Let's change. You sing a song, then Mom sings a song, then Papa sings a song, and then it's your turn to sing. How about that? Let's see who can sing the most songs." Murphy finally found a way to compromise and played a game with she. Maybe it was because they were eager to go back, but it didn't take them long to reach Spring City. However, Yang-yi didn't plan to go back to Jiang City today. According to the plan, they still had to play in Spring City for a day. Coming to such a beautiful place, wouldn't it be a pity if they didn't tour the scenery of Spring City and try the local delicacies? Therefore, they went directly to Jianqi Lake National Park in the morning. Jianqi Lake National Park was a little big. After Yang-yi bought the tickets, he could drive Murphy and she around. It was said that Jianqi Lake wasn't so beautiful in the past, and it was even troubled by pollution. However, under the vigorous management of Spring City, not only did the water quality recover and become clean and clear, but the grass along the coast was also neatly trimmed. At a glance, it was refreshing. After taking many photos and memories by Jianqi Lake, Yang-yi and the others went to a rice noodle shop in Spring City for lunch at noon. "Come, Kai-yun. Cross the bridge, rice noodle is a must," Yang-yi said to Murphy and she. She was very curious. She ran to the granny and watched the granny add ingredients to the big plate. No chili, I don't want chili," the little girl suddenly cried out. She ran to her father and complained with her small mouth, "Papa, I don't want chili." "But the granny has chili in it." "I don't want chili either," Murphy said quickly. She didn't like to eat spicy food. She couldn't eat spicy food at all. This was exactly the same as Murphy. This rice noodle shop was an old shop, and the service standards were not as high as those in big hotels. Therefore, the meat, sour bamboo shoots, and other ingredients were directly placed on the plate and not separated by small plates. Yang-yi stood up and smiled at the granny, who stopped in surprise and said, "I'm sorry, give me the plate with chili. Don't put any more chili in the other dishes." Finally, the dishes were served. In addition to the previous bowl of rice noodle, there was also a big bowl in front of each person. It was filled with thick soup and was covered with a layer of chicken and duck fat. Yang-yi was not so particular. He helped she and Murphy to put the ingredients and rice noodle into the soup. He gently mixed it, and the oily noodles spread out. The originally calm soup unexpectedly emitted white steam. "It's very hot. You can't eat it yet." Yang-yi turned his head and saw she who was holding chopsticks in her mouth. He said, "Before it gets cold, Papa will tell you a story first." "Okay. What story?" She saw the steam in the soup and knew that it was very hot. Therefore, she shifted her attention from the food to her father. Chapter 5:14. Not only she, but also Murphy looked at Yang-yi curiously. "Do you know where the crossing bridge rice noodles came from?" Yang-yi asked. "I know." Murphy chuckled. "I know what story you're going to tell." Yang-yi raised his eyebrows and said deliberately, "Really? You know all about it? Then I won't tell you." But I don't know." She shook her head, twisted her little buttocks on the chair, and cried anxiously, "Papa, I want to hear it." Yang-yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry and said, "Okay, Mom, don't spoil it. I'll tell she." Murphy waved her small fist at him, but her eyes were full of smiles. Long, long ago there was a scholar. In order to concentrate on preparing for the exam, he studied on an island in the center of Jianqi Lake that we just went to. Yang-yi said with a little modification, there was no food on the island, no restaurant, and he was alone. So, at lunchtime, his wife would come to bring him lunch. But because the journey was a little long, when she arrived at the island, the food was cold. It doesn't taste good when it's cold. She had been immersed in her father's vivid story, and the little girl kindly reminded him. Yes. Yang-yi clapped his hands, gave she a thumbs up, and said, She, you're so smart. Yes, the food doesn't taste good when it's cold. She was praised. She twisted her fingers and smiled happily. But there was no other way. At that time, it was not as convenient as it is now. There was no insulated box, and it would definitely be cold. What could I do? Yang-yi said, deliberately keeping her guessing. Murphy's eyes sparkled as she looked at Yang-yi. She could hear the flaws in Yang-yi's story, but she didn't say anything. She just sat there holding back her laughter. What should we do? She tilted her head and thought for a while. Then, she stopped smiling and asked worriedly. That young lady thought of a very good idea, which is to make the crossing the bridge rice noodles that we eat. The other dishes are all boiled and then placed on a plate and placed in a basket. And the most important thing is the soup. Yang-yi pointed to the big bowl and said with a smile, after the soup is cooked, it is covered with a layer of fat chicken oil. The little girl's mouth was slightly open as she listened attentively. This layer of oil is the key. Because the oil cap is on the broth, it can block the heat in the broth and make it difficult for the broth to come into contact with the air and lose its heat. Yang-yi gestured with his fingers as he led Shi into science. How miraculous! Shi's big eyes were filled with amazement. So, that young lady brought this bowl of hot broth to the island and then put in the cooked dishes and rice noodles. Just like what we have now, all the dishes and rice noodles were boiled by the hot broth, and the scholar could eat a hot and fragrant lunch. Finally, he could continue to work hard to prepare for the exam. This is the origin of the crossing the bridge rice noodles. Yang-yi finished and was ready to receive his daughter's praise. However, at this time, Murphy couldn't help it. She laughed and said, Wait, we have the rice noodles, but what about the crossing the bridge rice noodles? Yang-yi was stunned for a moment. He quickly thought of the key point and didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he explained, that young lady went to the island through a bridge, so this dish is called crossing the bridge rice noodles. As he spoke, Yang-yi couldn't help but stare at Murphy, as if complaining, You're actually undermining me. Murphy's plot succeeded, and she secretly smiled. She also stared at Yang-yi and said, Humph, what's wrong? You're not convinced? She didn't think much of it. She felt that this story was very interesting, and she also learned something new. She smiled happily and watched her parents make eyes at each other. Because the broth was still a little hot, Yang-yi asked for a small bowl, scooped out some, and blew on it while feeding it to the little girl. Yang-yi picked up a strand of rice noodle and watched as the little girl slurped it into her mouth and munched on it. He asked with concern, Are you okay? Do you think it's delicious? It's tasteless. She shook her head. It's tasteless? Then drink some broth. Eat this with the broth, a chopstick of rice noodles, and a spoon of broth. Yang-yi scooped some broth into a small bowl and then let Shi taste it. Finally, the little girl's eyes lit up and she said, It's delicious. Shi followed her father, and she was very picky. She knew what tasted good and what tasted good. This broth was stewed with duck, chicken, and pig bones. How could it not taste good? She tried other dishes. The chicken was okay, the vegetables were not good, the coriander was not good, and the thin slices of meat were also delicious. However, Shi's favorite was still the small quail egg. However, there was only one quail egg in each bowl. After she finished the one in her bowl, she still wanted more and looked at her father eagerly. Yang-yi was about to give his to her. Don't want this, don't want this. She anxiously grabbed her father's hand and said, "It's spicy." She really didn't like spicy food. She could smell the spicy smell coming from the broth. It's not very spicy. Yang-yi had already tasted it. The stir-fried chilies here were not spicy at all compared to those in Sichuan and Xiongnan. He said, "Try it if you don't believe me." "No, I don't want it." The little girl shook her little head in resistance. "How about I brush it with water for you?" Yang-yi said. She's little head shook like a rattle drum. Murphy took the quail egg from her bowl and said with a smile, "Then she will eat mommy's." She agreed this time. She even opened her little mouth happily, raised her little head, pointed at herself, and said happily, "Mom, here, let me eat." Little lazy bum. Murphy stuffed the egg into she's mouth and watched her eat with joy. She couldn't help but laugh and say, "There's no more. I'm full too." She patted her little belly and said proudly. She just drank 2 small bowls of thick soup and ate a lot of meat. Her little belly was already bulging. After serving his daughter, Yang-yi was relieved. He waved his chopsticks and slurped a big mouthful of rice noodles. He was also a little hungry. However, while Yang-yi was eating, he also gave the quail egg from his bowl to Murphy. Murphy ate slowly. She still had a big bowl. "Hey, don't give it to me." Murphy saw a little chili oil floating on her clear soup. Although she felt warm in her heart for Yang-yi's caring behavior, she couldn't help but complain. "You're eating enough for 2 people. Hurry up and eat more." Yang-yi said with a smile, "And it's really not spicy. I'm not lying to you. Try it. If it's spicy, you can beat me, okay?" "I can't beat you." Murphy patted Yang-yi's shoulder gently. Yang-yi smiled and continued to give her the best duck meat in his bowl. "Good girl, eat more." "I don't want to. I don't want to become a fat pregnant woman when I'm pregnant." Murphy said angrily. "Take it back. You don't have any dishes left. The rest is mine. What's there to be afraid of?" Yang-yi smiled. "And I don't like duck meat." Of course, this was a blatant lie. Murphy had eaten duck with Yang-yi at home. Murphy couldn't persuade Yang-yi. She could only think about it. She took the fancy pork and chicken from her bowl and gave them to Yang-yi. "Then help me eat this. It's too greasy." In fact, it wasn't particularly greasy. This kind of pork and chicken was delicious. Yang-yi and Murphy were like this. They pushed each other and ate for a long time. Chapter 5:15. When Yang-yi was still playing with Murphy and Shi from Spring City in the southwest to the ancient capital of Chong'an, the entertainment circle was once again engulfed in a whirlwind of brainwashing songs. After half a year, Zhu Jie once again released a new song, That Night. That night, you didn't reject me. That night, I hurt you. This song was even more brainwashing than a mistress, and it had a special charm to it. Zhu Jie's singing in the single CD was very heartbreaking. After all, Niu Meiling had also spent a lot of effort to invite the gold medal producer, teacher Duan Shurong, to guide and tune Zhu Jie. The slightly nasal singing sounded like a drunkard, magnifying the man's sad feelings. In such a sad and helpless song, That Night gradually invaded people's eardrums and minds, becoming a melody that could not be forgotten. Although it wasn't that exaggerated, and the song took nearly a week to spread, when people suddenly realized it in their intoxication, they would mistakenly think that it became popular overnight. It was as if That Night had entered people's vision overnight, and it was also as if it had been sung in the streets overnight. Shoe stores, hair salons, discount clothing stores, and other shops were all playing the song with their loudspeakers. I miss and miss, I hope and hope, I hope to return to our first love. I look and hope, I look and hope, I see your smile again here. when the magical sound entered people's ears, anyone who heard it couldn't help but want to snort, "That night." This was a phenomenal song. Although the critics' criticism of the song was far more than the praise, the jaw-dropping thing was that even though the reviews in the industry were terrible, the song's sales were becoming more and more popular. When Yang Yi's family returned to Zhongqing from the signing event, "That Night" had already surpassed "Glory" on the new song chart. With a proud posture, it continued to advance to a higher ranking, and even the throne of the first place. Zhu Jie also finally began to participate in variety shows again. He was indeed a man with a funny personality. He played in variety shows with ease. Even if others ridiculed him for his bad reviews, Zhu Jie would still reply with a smile, "I'm a more realistic person. My attitude towards music is based on what my fans like. After all, it's a pop song, and we're competing in popularity. It's not about the positive themes, beautiful melodies, and positive energy that the music critics mentioned. It's a very simple principle. My songs can sell well, but the songs praised by the music critics can't sell well. So which one is considered a pop song? Besides, even if I wrote such a song to cater to the tastes of the music critics, how many sales can the music critics give me? A few hundred? A few thousand? I'm afraid it's not even a fraction of my current results. Only a retard would listen to their nonsense." Although Zhu Jie did not say this sentence out loud, everyone could hear the meaning behind his words. With his comments on the variety show, the music critics were even fiercer in their criticism of "That Night." Some older musicians even wanted to launch a boycott of Zhu Jie and "That Night" in the entertainment industry. The lyrics of this song are vulgar, uncultured, and always give people bad associations. It even encourages people to have one-night stands. This is a kind of blasphemy and desecration to people's souls. However, the current music industry was no longer the small circle that was controlled by them decades ago. All kinds of interests were intertwined, and it was more integrated and open. Hundreds of flowers bloomed and hundreds of schools of thought contended. Spoof songs like "That Night" and "Mistress" also had the soil to survive. The so-called boycott was just a few old musicians shouting and inviting some media to report it. However, their actions were like throwing a stone into the Yellow River. The water splashed, but it was quickly drowned by the surging waves. As for "That Night," it was still circulating on the streets. It was deeply loved by the general public. Not to mention the red-headed and green-haired street youths, even children in open-crotch pants were jumping and shouting, "That night, you didn't reject me." The influence of "That Night" continued to heat up. On the internet, the first annual Weibo Cup micromovie competition, organized by Micro Broadcasting, had also entered the final selection stage. The preliminary round was an online voting. Micro Broadcasting users would vote for 20 outstanding micromovies. Of course, it was worth mentioning that before the competition started, Yang Yi had already reminded Mao Peifu to organize the most elite technical staff to modify the voting system in advance and set up many conditions to increase the difficulty of online vote manipulation. As expected, when the preliminary round of the micromovie competition began to enter the voting stage, a large number of fake accounts appeared on Micro Broadcasting, trying to influence the voting results. Fortunately, the conditions and thresholds prepared in advance rejected them. In addition, the technical staff kept watch day and night, catching works that were suspected of vote manipulation from time to time, severely examining and even punishing them. In the end, the fairness of the voting results was ensured. The final round was interesting. The Weibo Cup micromovie competition was a collaboration with Jiangchuan's University Film Festival. Backwave Technology Company invited 20 participating teams to come to Jiang City Media University to compete in the final round. Jiangchuan's auditorium would play the micromovies they shot over the next 2 days. Just like the movie press conference, the main creative team that came to participate in the competition would also be introduced to the audience by the host. Of course, this was just a small honor. The final round of judging would be judged by Jiangchuan, Shanghai Drama Academy, Beijing Film Academy, Beijing Drama Academy, and a few other top film and television schools, as well as a celebrity jury formed by some big shots in the film industry. They would choose the first, second, and third places together. This scale was not inferior to an ordinary film festival or film award selection. Of course, just throwing money was not enough. This was also the result of Jiang Chuan's strong support. After all, this was a big competition organized by Jiang Chuan's own student. Mao Peifu was still in charge of this big project. How could Jiang Chuan sit back and do nothing? Finally, the first annual Weibo Cup micromovie competition came to an end in mid-April. The first place was a micromovie with a touching plot, Back View, directed by a student from Beijing Film Academy. The awarding of this award also indirectly destroyed the rumors of Jiang Chuan's remote control micromovie competition. The second place came from The Folk. It was a comedy mini-movie, Xiaobing Hero, which was self-directed by a group of unknown side actors. It was a hilarious story about a young man who sold Xiaobing and dreamed of becoming a chivalrous hero. This micromovie also received unanimous praise on the internet. It was said that even before the award, there were already film companies that wanted to sign them as real actors just based on their amazing performance. The third place was finally taken by Jiang Chuan's student. It told the story of a forest ranger sacrificing himself to protect a migratory bird. It was adapted from a true story. Although it was only 10 minutes long, it was extremely detailed. Watching it made one's nose snot and tears flow. Although there were some who questioned whether Jiang Chuan was saving himself some face, the overall comments were still positive. After all, this movie was really touching. Many people were hoping that it would win the first prize. Although it only got third place, it was said that this micromovie was also seen by the film company and was discussing with them about the rights to adapt it. Not only the top 3, but the top 20 teams that were voted out also gained something. Not only did they gain monetary rewards, but they also gained the attention that they desired. This was also a great help to their future stardom. The micromovie competition came to a successful end. Everyone gained a lot. Micro-broadcasting also gained more attention. Of course, it also successfully made everyone accept the concept of micromovies. Seeing the popularity of the first competition, many spectators became restless. They rubbed their palms together and prepared to participate in the next competition. There was still the autumn competition after the spring festival competition. They wanted to be like these lucky people and stand out among their peers. Chapter 5:16. Compared to micro-broadcasting, Facebook's performance was much more lackluster. It was even more popular among university students. Young and energetic university students preferred to post some photos and diaries on Facebook. However, when it came to working people, Facebook could not be promoted. Even though the person in charge of Facebook had applied for funds from Yang Yi to advertise in office buildings a few times, the results were mediocre. This kind of semi-public and semi-private homepage that was similar to a blog was not popular. This made Yang Yi feel strange. Could it be that it was the same as in his previous life, where social networking sites like Facebook or Renren did not have the potential to develop in China? Yang Yi was still a little unsatisfied. He decided to give it another try. Therefore, Yang Yi called Mao Peifu, who had been performing well recently but was only in charge of the human resources of Backwave Technology Company and the micro-movie competition that had just ended, over. He gave Mao Peifu a new project and asked her to be the person in charge to develop a web game called Leisure Farm. Of course, it was not to change her career to a game. Instead, this project would be like the micro-movie competition and shoulder the role of promoting their social networking site. However, whether Leisure Farm would be used on Facebook or micro-broadcasting was still up for discussion. Yang Yi was inclined to use it on Facebook to increase Facebook's popularity. Then, he would look at Facebook's development and decide whether to keep Facebook or not. Of course, Yang Yi did not communicate with Mao Peifu. He only handed over a very promising project to a business talent who had shown that she was worthy of being trained by Yang Yi. Needless to say, Yang Yi's plan had reignited Mao Peifu's fighting spirit. She had also put her heart back into it. Even though her family was quite satisfied with her and wanted to call her back to take over some of the family business affairs, after all, the family business had too many restrictions. Mao Peifu still wanted to rely on her own efforts to achieve results. After Yang Yi returned to Zhongqing, he discussed this with Mao Peifu at the coffee shop. Not long after, Du Yuanlei, who knew that Yang Yi had returned, came to the coffee shop. "Teacher Yang Yi, you're finally back." Du Yuanlei looked at Yang Yi with some resentment. This resentment made Yang Yi think that he had done something wrong to the girl. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he said, "Why are you looking for me? About the casting for the movie?" Du Yuanlei nodded. Her helpless eyes seemed to say, "Do you still remember that you have a movie in preparation? Then tell me, what do you need my help with?" Yang Yi said straightforwardly, "Let me report to you about the casting progress of The Fugitive," Du Yuanlei said to Yang Yi as she picked up a book. Ding Xiang brought a cup of coffee to Du Yuanlei and also poured some for Yang Yi. Yang Yi called out to Ding Xiang, "Ding Xiang, take out the special Blue Mountain coffee beans I brought back from Yongcheng some time ago and grind a pot." This batch of coffee beans was more authentic. Fu Jun had specially ordered someone to buy them for Yang Yi. They had almost changed hands, so naturally, the price wasn't cheap. However, Yang Yi wasn't stingy. He let such good coffee beans stay in the coffee shop. Occasionally, he would come over to drink a cup or two. He would also invite friends to taste it. For example, Guazi drank with Yang Yi a few times. Du Yuanlei wasn't particularly interested in coffee. After Yang Yi finished explaining to Ding Xiang, she continued, "After a few days of auditions, we've decided to let Guazi play the role of police officer Du Jiang. He's very experienced in playing the role of a police officer, especially some of his hand movements. He's able to portray the police officer very realistically in detail. Other than Guazi, we've also invited a few experienced actors to audition. But overall, Guazi's portrayal of Du Jiang is the most realistic. Plus, his entire person is full of laughs. Any random scene can make people laugh." Du Yuanlei was worried that Yang Yi would accuse her of abusing her power for personal gain, so she added on. Yang Yi didn't think much of it. He smiled and said, "I was wondering why he went to the police station recently to experience life. It turns out that he's observing and imitating to gain experience." It was also Guazi who had the qualifications. In order to play a good role, he could mix into the police team and go to the scene with experienced old police officers to figure out other people's movements, expressions, and dialogue. Wang Li's candidate has always been difficult to choose because he has strict requirements for the body. He has to be short, thin, and good at acting. He has to be able to portray the character's naivety and clumsiness without leaving any traces. "We've let a lot of actors audition, but none of them could satisfy us," Du Yuanlei said. "Then how did you find him?" Yang Yi asked curiously. "Because of Guazi's recommendation, he let Geng Sha, the young actor who gave you the award for the lead role of Soldier Assault, come over for an audition. We found that he completely met our requirements." Du Yuanlei revealed a smile and said, "Not only does he meet all the requirements, but his acting is also really good." Yang Yi was a little surprised. "You mean Geng Sha? So it's him." Yes, even Guazi was surprised by Geng Sha's acting skills. After all, it was under director Chen's guidance. Geng Sha's acting skills can already portray his naivety without any traces of acting. Furthermore, he's usually not naive. "He's quite a smart boy," Du Yuanlei said. "Isn't Geng Sha still filming Soldier Assault? Why is he free for an audition?" Yang Yi asked, puzzled. "He took the time to come over for an audition. It happened last month, and Soldier Assault is about to finish filming. Geng Sha doesn't have any scheduling conflicts, so I don't think there's a problem," Du Yuanlei said. "I don't have any objections to him playing Wang Li, but who's playing Ludi?" Yang Yi asked with a smile. Du Yuanlei took a deep look at Yang Yi and said slowly, "We found suitable candidates for the other roles, but there are only two. First, we're still conflicted about the person you asked about playing Ludi, but let's talk about Wang Mai first, the little girl who's mentally isolated in the script." Yang Yi had an ominous feeling. Sure enough, Du Yuanlei said, some talent agencies recommended some little girls for the audition, but in comparison, I'm more inclined to let Shishi play the role of Wang Mai. Yang Yi said with a headache, "Why are you talking about Shishi again? Didn't I tell you that Shishi isn't even 5 years old? She doesn't know anything about acting, right?" In the script, Wang Mai is also 5, 6, or 7 years old. Furthermore, Shishi is tall, so she looks very suitable for the role. For example, Guazi's age doesn't match Du Zhang's, but with makeup, he can also play a middle-aged police officer, Du Yuanlei said. Also, Mr. Yang, you've misunderstood your daughter. It's not that she doesn't know how to act. She knows it, and she's very talented and interested. Have you forgotten her performance at the Christmas party? Of course, Yang Yi remembered. He still remembered that his daughter played the role of the ugly duckling. But Wang Mai is too different from Shishi. Wang Mai is silent and gloomy, while Shishi likes to talk and laugh. Even if she acts, she can't play a role like Wang Mai. Yang Yi said, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Yang Yi didn't want Shishi to come into contact with the entertainment industry too early. Therefore, even though he liked to show off on Weibo, he had never posted a picture of Shishi's face. Or he would use other pictures to cover Shishi's face. Acting is all about playing a role. She can't play a role just by being herself. For a role like Wang Mai, we can't find a little girl with autism to play it. Du Yuanlei tried her best to persuade Yang Yi, but she couldn't find the crux of the problem. I believe that Shishi, a little girl who likes to act, can play a role that only requires her to maintain a silent and sad expression. Seeing that Yang Yi was still hesitating about how to reject her, Du Yuanlei became anxious. She said, "Mr. Yang, regarding Ludi, we don't have a suitable candidate, right? Actually, we think that this role is very suitable for you." Chapter 517. When Yang Yi returned to the villa, the car was still parked in front, waiting for the electric gate to open. A little yellow dog had already run to the gate, excitedly jumping around and wagging its tail, welcoming Yang Yi's return. Steamed Bun had inherited the fine traditions of his ancestors, and his keen sense of hearing and smell were not for nothing. "Papa!" At this time, Cici, who didn't go to kindergarten on the weekend, appeared at the window of the villa. When she saw her father's car, she happily called out, "Mama, it's really Papa who's back." She was still skeptical of Steamed Bun's judgment. After a while, Yang Yi parked the car and got out. The little girl couldn't wait to throw herself into her father's arms. Yang Yi was about to squat down and hug Shishi, while Steamed Bun wagged its tail and jumped back and forth, trying to attract the attention of the two masters. Look at me, I'm here to welcome you." Yang Yi was happy. He stretched out his right hand and scratched Steamed Bun's head. The little puppy happily stuck out its tongue and narrowed its eyes. "You're back? How did it go?" Murphy also came out of the house, gently stroking her belly, which was not particularly protruding yet, and looked at Yang Yi gently with a smile. "It went well, but there are other things I'll discuss with you later." Yang Yi stood up with Shishi in his arms, reached out to hold Murphy's waist, and walked back into the house together. "Papa, Steamed Bun found us first. It ran super fast." Shishi hugged her father's neck and couldn't wait to tell her father about her discovery. Steamed Bun seemed to have heard its name and jumped on the ground excitedly. Unfortunately, it was too small, and its short legs couldn't reach Yang Yi's knees, let alone the little master who was being held up by the big master. "Papa knows. Because a dog's hearing is 16 times better than a human's, and its sense of smell is 40 times better than a human's, which means that its ears and nose are better than a human's." Yang Yi explained to his daughter, "So it can find out that Dad is back before Shishi." She was suddenly enlightened. She said, "Papa, do Little Guai, Little Gray and Dodo have bad ears and noses? They don't know that Papa is back." Yang Yi turned his head and looked at the cat nest. There was only one cat, Shiver, lying on the cat tree. The other two were nowhere to be seen. However, there was no need to worry. After being castrated, Little Guai and Little Gray were more homesick and would only play in the villa. Cats, the situation is different for cats. Yang Yi smiled bitterly and said, although a cat's ears and nose are not as good as a dog's, they are still better than us humans. It's just that they have a cold personality. If they want to play with you, they will come back to play with you. If they don't want to play with you, they will not even look at you. Father, let me give you an example. If Steamed Bun finds out that Papa is back, he will think like this. Yang Yi put Shishi down and then shouted in a strange tone, "Wow, you're back, you're back. Ha ha ha, ha ha ha, I'm so happy that you're back. I'm so happy that you're back to play with me." Yang Yi tried his best to restore Steamed Bun's inner OS and even imitated his expression. Looking at his wide eyes, shaking eyebrows, and excited appearance, not to mention Shishi, even Murphy could not help but burst out laughing. Shishi giggled and said, "Steamed Bun can't speak. Papa, you're weird. But do you know what little Guai and the others think?" Yang Yi returned to his normal tone, stretched out a finger, and stopped imitating Steamed Bun. "I don't know," she said with a smile. Murphy found a sofa and sat down. She couldn't stop laughing just now and was worried that she would laugh until her legs turned to jelly. Yang Yi put on a cold expression and said in a strange tone, "You're back. And, I know. I don't care. Don't look for me if there's anything, I still have my own things to do." Yang Yi waved his hand as if he was swatting a fly. Then, with a look of disgust, he walked away step by step, just like a cat that glanced at you and then walked away. It could be said that it was very vivid. Murphy laughed so hard that she leaned forward and back and directly lay down on the sofa. She was also very happy. She even followed her father's strange cat steps and felt that it was like dancing. It was very fun. Steamed Bun did not know that his owners were teasing him and the three cat ancestors. He thought that Shishi was playing with him and excitedly ran around Shishi's feet, not feeling tired at all. After dinner, Yang Yi, Murphy, Shishi, and Steamed Bun took a leisurely stroll on the lakeside green path in the Villa district. Shishi and Steamed Bun walked in front. The little girl was chattering with Steamed Bun about something and was very excited. Yang Yi, on the other hand, talked to Mo Fei about what happened this afternoon. Director Du said that my image and temperament are suitable for this role. To put it bluntly, I'm cool enough. Yang Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he said to Murphy, "So, you don't want to play Ludi, or you don't want Shishi to play Wang Mai?" After Murphy became pregnant, she became a lot more patient. She listened to Yang Yi's narration and asked slowly. Yang Yi frowned slightly and said, "Both. I don't want Shishi to come into contact with the entertainment industry too early. The environment in the entertainment industry is more complicated. I'm afraid that she will be wronged." However, Mo Fei seemed to be talking about her own experience incoherently. "When I was very young, I learned music from my mother. Then, when I was 6 years old, because our family still lived in a big city at that time, I was lucky enough to be on one of the more influential children's programs in the United States at that time, singing opera. Later, I was continuously invited to participate in some programs." Then Murphy talked about how she went back to Hong Kong to be a trainee when she grew up. Then, she debuted with the help of her mother's friends. "Although I was greatly influenced by my mother and entered the entertainment industry too early, I feel that I didn't go down the wrong path. I like music, so I persevered." Murphy seemed to be a little emotional as she said, "Then sometimes I think, if my mother didn't build a foundation for me early and use her connections to pave a path for me, would I still step into this industry? I think the answer is yes. Because I like it. But if I didn't have those early resources, I wouldn't have been able to go so smoothly. Compared to other trainees, I wouldn't have been able to get to where I am now. Perhaps, I need to experience more setbacks and give up more things before I can realize my dream. Maybe because I'm not willing to give up, I'm mediocre and my dream is out of reach. Reality is actually very cruel. Although you and I want to protect Shishi," Murphy said softly, "sometimes, too much protection is not a good thing. Of course, when you and I have the ability, we definitely can't let Shishi get hurt. But, can we say that in order to protect Shishi, we can't let her do what she likes to do? For example, if my father wants to protect me, Can he stop me from singing and not let me enter the entertainment industry? Mo Fei asked. You mean she likes to act? Yang Yi asked in surprise. I don't know. Maybe it's because she usually likes to perform. She also likes to participate in the kindergarten performance. She played the ugly duckling very well. Or maybe it's not. Children do things with a certain degree of enthusiasm. We don't know if she really likes to act. Murphy didn't give an accurate answer. But, if we don't try, how do we know if she likes it or not? How do we know if she has talent in this area? Murphy said. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.